This program is produced independently, made possible through private donations.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Doug, can you read the opening statement?
Yeah. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting. The Wmrhsd Regional High School District Board of Education notice was sent to the Morris County Clerk and the clerks of the municipalities comprising the regional district, the Observer Tribune, the Daily Record, and the Star Ledger. Notice was also posted in the District Administration Building, Wmrhsd Central High School, Wmrhsd Mendham High School, and on the Wmrhsd Regional website. Wmrhsd. Here. Jamie Button. Kristen Forrester.
Here.
Joseph Galida.
Here.
James Johnston.
Here.
David Lobron.
Here.
John Meyer.
Here.
Tom Richard.
Here.
Jackie Schramm.
Here.
Brendan Millick. And Brian Riccardi. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Could everybody please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could I please have a motion to approve the minutes from our December 12th regular meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Jackie.
Second.
Thank you, John. Discussion.
Yeah,
Yes, Tom.
I just would like to say one thing. I kind of would like to echo what Jackie said last meeting. I think it's kind of important to have it captured in the minutes somewhere what the public sentiment was at the meeting. We've done it in the past during a lot of good times, bad times. It seems to me it's been a lot more positive lately. The public wants us to get back to education. Last week there were a lot of compliments to Anthony's work over the last 34 years. And I know it's more work for Doug and Mary, but I think somewhere in here should be captured at least, general bulk items maybe, not specifically names of people and townships and all that. So I don't know.
No, we are working, Doug and Mary are working on trying to come up with a uniform way to do it that doesn't take as much time as it used to, so.
Yeah, I mean, even if 20 people commented about this, 15 about that, just general things. Whoa.
Tom, one of the things that we've been talking about is that, we do have two open to the public sessions during the meeting normally. That's what our normal course is. And what I would envision is that first open to the public, we would take and have public comment regarding the agenda that's in front of the board, because that's what you're here for, is to vote on those agenda items. And that is when the public at that point could influence your votes at that point on any of the items that might be on that agenda. And then that way we could report out, if it was business ops or personnel or governance in that first section. Then in the second open to the public, if there were other things that folks wanted to express to the board, we could then capture it there and try to again, we're going to be the writers, and of what is being said that night. And of course, we'd present to the board, and then you could respond as to whether it fits the bill of what you're looking for.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion. And we could initiate that anytime the board wanted to, but it seemed to me that the reorg might be a better time for implementing a change. But it's up to you.
Any other discussion?
Okay.
Thanks, Tom. Any other discussion?
I was going to echo Tom's sentiments, because I remember in the minutes you used to read who was there. You kind of got a gist of what they were saying, and I like it. It's difficult when there's a ton of people. I recognize the burden on you guys, but I think it was informative, so I would agree also.
Right, that's why I said even if it had a bucket of information, just 30 people commented on this, 20 on that, there were 2 negatives, and just so the board and the public had a feel after the meeting for kind of what the gist of the meeting was.
Okay, thanks for your feedback.
That's it.
Any other discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, work session.
I just have come from the memorial service of Stephen Burstler, Wmrhsd Central graduate. And while I was there, I spoke to his dad, and his dad knew that I was coming to a board meeting this evening. And he said to me, one thing that I'd like you to say is to thank the Special Services Department for all that they'd done for his son. And I wanted to echo that sentiment here. In addition to that, it's very sad for me to report that Derek Palmy, Wmrhsd Central graduate, whose mom is also a teacher at Wmrhsd Mendham, passed away yesterday. So I'd like to begin this meeting this evening, with a moment of silence for both Stephen and Derek. Thank you very much, and I'd like to extend our deepest sympathies to both of their families. Another chapter of our continuing sister school relationship through Gilder Lehrman with urban high schools occurred last Friday, when Wmrhsd Central students joined students from Frederick Douglass Academy in a visit to the New York Holocaust Museum and to the World Trade Center Memorial Site. It was once again a very moving day when we watched students from this school interact with students from Frederick Douglass Academy. Frederick Douglass Academy is a famous school within New York City. They have the patronage of Representative Charles Rangel. They have connections with Walter Mosley stops in to see them. Katie Couric stops in there. And the principal of Frederick Douglass Academy, Dr. Gregory Hodge, says to me that the best thing that happens with his students are the interactions with the students from Wmrhsd Central. And I know that Roseanne LeChatton is in the audience, and Roseanne was instrumental in framing and planning for this visit, along with Michelle Monge. I know that another thing that they're planning to do is follow that up with a visit to Columbia University with the hopes of having a joint session with a lecture by historian Ken Jackson. I know that Mendham is continuing their sister school relationship with Newark History High School, which has had the difficulty of having to move their headquarters, but we will continue that also. In addition, I wanted to recognize Mr. Roy Hamlin. He was Wmrhsd Mendham history teacher. He was named by the Star-Ledger as the Boys Cross Country State Coach of the Year. The article mentions his strategies, his team's accomplishments, 4 state conference championships, and the 2nd state conference, New Jersey Athletic Conference crown. But I think more important than all of that has been the culture of inclusion, team spirit, and hard work that has characterized Mr. Hamlin's coaching in our district for the past 23 years. One more piece of that is this evening we have Mr. Steve Santucci, history teacher at Mendham High School, who's been engaged in a unique, I guess we could call it an experiment, with the National Park Service, and I've asked him to give the board a brief update on those activities. Steve.
Good evening. I'm a high school teacher at Mendham High School, and December 2010, the gentleman standing behind me, Chief of Interpretation Justin Minetti, approached me one December evening and said, "Hey, would you be interested in working for the summer? I got this great program, and I think you're the match for it." And I told him, "Well, tell me about it." And I'm going to have him explain briefly what the program is so you're familiar with it. Justin?
The program is titled Teacher Ranger Teacher. The intent of the program is to actually pull educators from local school districts in to provide their expertise as formal educators into what really is the largest informal education institution in the country, the National Park Service. We have a lot of the original resources, artifacts, cultural and natural features that you find in the textbooks that you teach about. So our intent was to provide funding to bring teachers in, immerse them in these resources, and have them provide their experience to teach us about how we can better provide experiences for students in the local area, or provide better educational opportunities for while utilizing these resources that we have in the parks in and around the counties. So Steve actually spent the last summer with us. He's been involved with us in a number of avenues, volunteering in the park as well. So we thought it was a great fit. And I'll let Steve talk a little more about the specific activities that he completed over this summer.
I did bring a handout to give to you so you can read in more detail some of the projects. I started 4 days after school finished. Is 40 days, and knowing how summer ran, I worked almost every single day. And it wasn't about the money, it was about the opportunity to be able to work at a place that I volunteer, but to work on a daily basis to provide my expertise and knowledge of American history in particular, and as a resource as a teacher to help develop programs to take Morristown National Historical Park in particular into the 21st century. There are great resources just in human commodity as well as in the natural resources as mentioned, and the physical artifacts, which not many people can say they actually touched a letter written by George Washington. I had that opportunity. And of course, my youngest son is named after Alexander Hamilton, and I asked if I could touch the A&H in a letter written to Washington from Alexander as Secretary of Treasury in regards to the Whiskey Rebellion. Those for me, I love. But what was more important was creating programming for teachers for New Jersey and beyond. Moving things onto the website for the Park Service, creating teacher-oriented material that could be used, document-based questions. Working with two of the seasonal college students this past summer, it was their idea. They said, we've got to do something that's audio or visual, something that we can bring to life a lot of these words. And I said, hey, I got a great idea. I've got the park historian who has thousands of transcribed documents. What if we create a theme of the winter encampment? And one of them had experience doing voiceovers. So we created near professional audio podcasts that will be going up sometime soon, depicting certain themes, but in the words of the participants of the American Revolution, from the common soldier up to George Washington himself. And of course, we included women and minorities who served in the American Revolution to give that broad experience that it wasn't just a limited fight, that this was widespread. Other opportunities, I worked with a former graduate of Mendham High School, graduated, she's a junior now this year in college, so about almost 4 years ago, who was part of another program within the Park Service in Morristown is the Archives Ambassadors, where high school students geared in history and going into education work with actual archival material to develop lesson plans, and then students from local schools who apply, usually high school age, then come for a week and work with those teachers, and they use those lesson plans to get the students immersed into it. As part of that, my responsibility was to spend a part of the day giving a tour of the historic site of Jockey Hollow and talking to the students how, as a historian and a teacher, we utilize the primary sources and how we interpret them to recreate the past through living history. And I had an opportunity to spend part of the day with those students, and it was great to see one of my former students involved in this groundbreaking project. I also worked with Edison National Park, working with their TRT, helping them refine their educational programming and tours for high school and middle school. And I took a trip to Saratoga to study how they do an immersion weekend with students, middle school age students, sleeping in tents at Saratoga National Battlefield Park. My hopes is in the coming year to develop a program for teachers, an immersion program where they stay out overnight in a hut and experience what Continental soldiers experience without the hardship of weather and the lack of food and clothing, but to give them that experience. And I have to give credit to parents that I serve in this community for giving that idea. One day, I give extra credit for students to come out in events, and I was talking to a parent saying, why do the kids get it? Why are they so love coming out, and they talk so colorfully about their experience? And the parent said, because you make it come alive as if you were there. And I said, what if more teachers could have that experience where they can make it come alive? And with the help of Justin and his experience with these type of programs, we hope to develop eventually, possibly, a student overnight that would give them an opportunity with teachers that are experienced. And they already do it in other parts of the park, so we'll be looking down the future of that. But right now we're looking at high school teachers and middle school teachers to have that experience. These are just a few of the things I've been working on, and given that there's been some funding in the Park Service to continue the teacher to ranger to teacher program, I'll be coming back to go even further with these projects and see them through.
There's an additional pilot program as well called Parks for Every Classroom, where it's more of an immersive experience for teachers, and where teachers are coming in, learning more about the resources, and then writing their own lesson plans, which fit their curriculum. And Steve will be helping us this summer to really mold that into something very valuable that educators in the local community can utilize.
I've already participated in 2 workshops in regards to that, and it's groundbreaking. Morristown has been chosen as one of 5 parks to be the pilot program to move this forward. So this is something that will be unfolding in the next couple of years. So I'll leave the handouts with the board secretary so that you could look at them at their leisure. I included photographs as well.
Does the board have any questions?
Yeah.
I believe, did you used to have a classroom in the library?
Yes.
Yeah, so when I worked at the library.
You're one of the unfortunate ones to hear my class.
Yeah, I just want to say you're a very engaging teacher. As I was shelving the books, I would listen to your class. You always kept the kids really engaged. They asked great questions. So you have a terrific teaching style. So the Park Service is certainly, honored to have you with us.
Yeah, and I'm honored to be with the Park Service. I wear this uniform with pride. The respect I received from the general public was amazing. Given the state of affairs with how people view government and public employees, to hear the responses in return, and then to their surprise when I heard I'm also a teacher, that equally doubled the praise. A lot of the visitors, even on New Year's Eve day, I worked as a volunteer because they were shorthanded due to illness, and people who were looking for something to do, they were like, my tours end up being, instead of the usual 30 to 40 minutes, they're 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm like running back to the next tour to start it. I can't get rid of the people once I've got them engaged.
But your hair is shorter.
It is a lot shorter. It was a lot longer. That was for filming with NJN back in 2008, 2009.
Have you also taught Alex Warkola?
Yes.
You led my Boy Scout troop?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have, yeah.
Thanks, Ian.
Yes.
Yeah, they all spoke very highly of that
Thank you.
activity. In fact, we have pictures on our Troop One website of their marching with George Washington.
That was a great opportunity. A couple years ago, we had a rededication of a roadside marker for the Irish in the American Revolution, the Pennsylvania line. And it so happens it was time with a weekend that they were coming out, and I said, hey guys, you want to march in this parade? And you get to meet the George Washington from Mount Vernon, and they're like, yes. And Alex and several other students that I knew were like all for it, and they helped organize that and it worked out very well.
The boys still talk about it.
Yeah.
Steve, are the podcasts available just to download, or do you have to be in the Park Service?
We have a series of them, and we developed some additional.
Yeah.
Better to that. Sorry. We have a series of them, and we developed some education guides that go along with it. They'll be up on the website, on the National Park Service website, probably within the next week or so, and they're free.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And once they're up, I'll have them linked from my webpage at school.
Okay.
For communities,
Great.
yeah.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Steve.
Brian?
Brian.
If I could just say anything, I went to the Jockey Hollow, the Jockey Hollow when you offered extra credit.
Yes.
I drove my brother to the thing, and I just like to say that I think it was really informative, and I like that you have your students go out there, because me personally, I've never been out there, and now that I've visited, I definitely would go back.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Yeah, Brian was, and I had you a few years back, so he came out voluntarily with his brother. So it's a great opportunity to bring people out to a cultural resource that's in their backyard. And I know Mr. LeBron can remember this. It's not often I can point outside my window and say 3 miles down the road or right across the hill on the next valley over, Henry Wick, the man who owned a large tract of land that the Army camped on, is buried, on the other side of the school property. And it's an opportunity to be able to teach in this area with such a wealth of history and be so close to a national park.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but now that you mention it, in my other life as an administrator, I observed Mr. Santucci when he was in about his second month at Mendham High School. And during the lesson, he did make reference, which I remember vividly, to something. He said, look out the window. And on that spot, and you made a historical reference, and I was so impressed that you, being new to the school, you were able to do that. And you could see the kids really, come alive when you were talking, because you do make history become alive, which I really thank you for.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you didn't wear the hat.
Oh, we're indoors, but if you...
Yeah.
One week in April, National Parks Week, I will be in uniform all week, so you can come down and take a picture with me.
At our last meeting, you know that I described the honors that our IB psychology students received when they submitted their papers to the New Jersey chapter of the American Psychological Association. After that presentation, I received questions from a number of board members regarding that competition. So I decided to ask the IB psychology teachers from each school to bring a couple of students in and to describe exactly what that activity is, because Mendham and Central so dominated that competition, and it highlights one of our most successful IB programs. I would like to begin by thanking Ms. Feltman and Ms. Brown to come up, please, and begin talking about this.
Good evening. I'm Erin Feltman, and I teach IB psychology here at Westmore Central High School. The Morris County Psychological Association every spring invites psychology teachers from Morris County to encourage their students to submit a piece of work that they have completed in the current academic year to a scholarship opportunity. Jen and I are very lucky to be able to submit work from our IB psychology class, and I think it really speaks to the rigor and the relevance of the work that we do in class, because we do very well year to year. Traditionally, I think both of us encourage our students to submit either their internal assessment or their extended essay. I'm going to talk a little bit about the extended essay in psychology, and Jen's going to talk about the internal assessment in psychology. I also have a couple students, Kelly McGee and Trevor Brown, who are going to talk to you a little bit more about what the extended essay entails. Basically, the extended essay is a 4,000-word paper that is a requirement of every student who is looking to complete their IB diploma. It's nice because they get to choose whatever topic it is that they want to write the paper on, and a lot of the kids choose to write it in psychology. And sometimes they know exactly what they want to write it on, and sometimes they just come and they say, you know, I'm interested in psychology and I would like to do my extended essay in psychology, because if I have to do the paper, then I want to do something that I'm really, really passionate and interested in. So they choose a topic, and then they choose a research question, which I think is one of the most challenging aspects of it, because it has to be specific enough that you can actually answer it in 4,000 words, which is about 10, somewhere between 10 and 12, maybe even higher than that, pages, which sounds like a lot, but it really isn't when you think about what they have to do. They have to demonstrate an in-depth understanding of the topic, and more than that, they have to take a look at journal articles from professional peer-reviewed journals that are published, and they have to analyze the journal articles. They have to summarize what the findings are of the study, and then they have to critique the studies so that they can demonstrate that they really understand what's going on in the journal articles. They then take them, compile them into, or I guess use them in the body of their paper to present a reasoned and sophisticated analysis of the research question, and then come to a balanced conclusion where they attempt to answer the research question based on what they have found from their research. So we're going to have Kelly talk about, I think, the research process and her topic a little bit, and Trevor's also going to introduce his topic and then talk about the process of actually writing the paper, because it's really done in those 2 rounds.
Hi. I'm Kelly McGee, and I wrote my extended essay on, obviously, psychology, but my paper sought to assess Freud's analysis of human homosexuality using biological and developmental prisms. And the extended essay for me was an interesting process in that it was nothing that we've ever done before. We've done history papers. We've done really extensive long research papers, but the extended essay is a whole different animal, in a good way. For me, the research process began after I selected my topic, and I came to Mrs. Feltman knowing that I wanted to do something that I was passionate about, and for me, I just decided on my topic and went from there. And the research process really began when we went to Rutgers on a trip with our IB class, where we were able to access their online computer databases as well as the stacks. And that's where I started to compile my sources. And the thing about a psychology paper is that you have to base everything on a source you really try and use as many research studies as possible. I think in my paper I used 23. I looked at probably more than double than that. And for me, since Freud is so controversial, I tried not to rely on secondary sources because I found that the author's bias often interfered with the meaning. So I actually read some of Freud's writings and then went from there. And after I read his writings, I then used biological and developmental studies to assess the validity of them. And my friend Trevor is going to talk about the actual crafting of the essay.
Hi, I'm Trevor Brown. I did my extended essay on psychopaths, and my essay actually sought to find out what it is biologically and socioculturally that will decide whether or not somebody will become a psychopath later in life. And I think I became interested in this topic because I had read somewhere a statistic that said an estimated 1% of people in Western society can be labeled as psychopaths. It is kind of it's a surprising statistic. You really wouldn't think that out of 100 people, one of them would potentially be dangerous to us in that way. And the reason that I wanted to find the causation of psychopathy is because if you are ever to try to find a treatment or a cure for this condition, you obviously have to start out by knowing what it is that would cause it. And so after I had found out what my research question would be, we went on the Rutgers trip, and that was the beginning of the research process for me. I found a couple of sources on the Rutgers trip, but the majority of the resources that I used in my my final draft came from online databases like JSTOR that I provided on the school website. And once I had collected enough sources and sort of analyzed them, knowing that they were fit for my essay and I was going to use them in whatever way, I started to put them into an outline. And my outline wasn't set up in such a way that it would be translated directly into a paper, but it was set up so that each source that I had found kind of had its own paragraph, where I would talk about the study, what the researchers, what their question was, and what the results were, and how I was going to potentially put it into my essay to support my hypothesis. So the outline basically gave a quick rundown of each study and how I was going to use it in the essay. And by the time I had finished my first draft of the outline in May, I think, I was not quite ready to begin my first draft, so I continued the research process over the summer, and every time I would find a new source that I thought would be good in my essay, I would, amend my outline in whatever way I thought necessary by adding another paragraph and by talking about how I would use that source in whatever way I thought necessary. So by the time the end of the summer came, around August, I began my first draft, and I think this was the most difficult part of the essay because at this point, I really just had this loosely structured outline that talked about all the sources and how I would potentially be using them in my essay, but I didn't really have too much definite, concrete structure for how I was going to develop my first draft. So I kind of thought about this as being a puzzle, right? I have all of these pieces that I know I'm going to use to create my first draft, but I don't necessarily know how I'm going to put them together. And that was definitely the most comprehensive stage for me, I think. And by the time I had finished my first draft, that was the end of the extreme part of the extended essay, I think. Because in my second and third draft, and the third draft was my final draft, I was really just taking what I had put into my first draft and doing what I have done in most high school papers, which is basically taking the information that I've been given in class, or in this case, what I've put into my first draft, and just refining it until I think it's perfect. And it's much different from the first draft and the research process, because this is something that is so much different from what I've been doing in high school and any other classes. It's just far beyond what I'm used to doing, and it was just so much, it was a great relief by the time I had gotten to the second and third draft, because I had this sense of accomplishment after finishing the first draft, and it was very rewarding by the time I had finished the paper to be able to look back and see how much I had accomplished. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Brown, and I teach the IB psychology over at Mendham High School. And as Aaron mentioned, the extended essays are one submission that we give to the Morris County Psychological Association. The other is the internal assessment. And the internal assessment is part of the IB curriculum. It is very different from the extended essays. The purpose from a teacher's perspective, and I think the benefits too for the internal assessment, are for students to understand the research process that goes into constructing psychological theories. So the topics are very different because students in the classes need to actually conduct the research. They still get to choose their own topic, but it's not something like psychopaths, and so because they actually have to run their research within the high school with a sample from the students, collect data, and do a statistical analysis. It's great for students, in my opinion, great for students to understand the painstaking process of doing research. And the one thing that I emphasize to my students, they're so worried that when they collect their data that it has to support their hypothesis. And they say, if it doesn't, do I get a 0 on the paper? And no, that's not the point. In fact, the point is for you to understand, chances are you won't support your hypothesis. And the analysis should be, why didn't you support your hypothesis? So Brian Riccardi and Emily Dean are here with me tonight, and they're going to talk about their topics for their internal assessment and how they conducted their research.
Hello. So for my senior year internal assessment, we did a similar project last year. I chose to investigate a replicated study done by Elizabeth Loftus, which addressed how human memory, the imperfection of human memory, and how we can create false memories based on various things in the past of what we believe to be true. I felt this was very interesting because in cases or in trials, eyewitness testimonies are considered as fact. But in the research, I found that there are many ways that human memories can be created that aren't exactly replicating of what happened in the past. So once I chose my topic, we, as Ms. Brown said, we choose 2 classes to perform our research on them, and we choose a control and experimental group. And for me, my control group was sorry. Okay, so we created a video, and this video was of a car crash. And after showing the students the video, we then asked them a series of questions. The control group were asked a series of questions of filler questions, including one question that asked, did you see how fast was the blue car going when it passed the red car? There was no red car in the video. Then that was the experimental group. Then the control group was asked very similar questions, just asking how fast the blue car was going, not mentioning a red car. Then at the end of the period, after the students had their regular classes for about an hour, we asked both groups, did you see a red car? And the group that was given the false presupposition of the red car was expected to recall the red car far more frequently than the control group, which was not exposed to the presupposition. Unfortunately, as Ms. Brown said, my research hypothesis was not supported due to participant bias, such as the social desirability effect. We felt that it's possible that the students, mostly sophomores that we tested, may have felt that they would have failed the experiment if they hadn't seen the red car, and possibly could have changed their answers. That was just one of the ideas that we could have had of why they didn't exactly support the research of Elizabeth Loftus, but we still found that there are many factors that lead to the creation of false memories, and also many things that play into why maybe they aren't created. So through the research process, we found the various ways that it could be created, how it couldn't be created, and in this process, when Ms. Brown first presents the internal assessment, it's a very daunting task because it ends up being about 2,000 words, and it includes inferential stat tests. Mine was specifically the chi-square test. We have all different types of, we make graphs, we have the discussion in which we discuss our results, why or why not they didn't work. We have to triangulate. I triangulated Loftus's studies with other studies that supported how false memories can be created. And the way that we do it in the school, however, divides up the different parts of the study, and we work through it in a way that allows us to take each step as it comes and evaluate our study very slowly in order to ensure that we investigate all parts of the study in great detail without becoming overwhelmed with how we do it. And I think that the way that we do it allows us to come up with a product that is very concise, but also detailed in how it represents the experiment that we conduct. And Brian will talk about his study.
For my study, I did a different topic than Emily, obviously, and my study was, I looked to see if words that are longer, basically like 4 syllables, are harder to memorize than words that are short, such as like a 2-syllable word or like a 1-syllable word. And the way I went about this the same way Emily did, by going to 2 classes, and instead of showing a video, I showed 2 PowerPoint presentations, one for the control group, which is just the group that I tried to have them memorize the short words, and for the experimental group, it was a combination of both short and long words. And I wanted to see that if the group that was supposed to remember the longer and the short words had more trouble remembering the more words in the control group. In the end, my results were kind of negligible. I think I had some problems with, I should have had a longer PowerPoint presentation, because then it would be, because if it's only 10 words in a PowerPoint, it's kind of easy to remember that regardless of how long the words are. I replicated a study by Alan Badley, and it's kind of hard to say anything now that Emily basically said everything about the internal assessment, but I guess you could talk about ecological validity when you write your papers, because there's really no point of doing any research unless you're going to have some real-world applications to it. And what I kind of thought from my research was that people always dread the so-called SAT words that they seem to never remember, and I thought maybe the fact that the words are longer than typical like colloquial speech is the reason why people have trouble remembering them. And if I could also just echo what Emily said, I think Mrs. Brown kind of puts the internal assessment at us in a fantastic way, because if like we just told us to do it, it would never, I'm pretty sure it would never be done, or never be done at the quality. We would never be getting awards for it, I'm sure. And that's basically all I have to say about the internal assessment.
Thank you very much for describing, I think, as I said, one of the most successful parts of our IB program. I'm wondering if any board members have questions.
Did you find, Brian and Emily, did you find that it's harder to design a study than you had thought going in?
Well, since we choose a topic to replicate, it makes it a lot easier, since the IB program only allows a certain amount of wiggle room between what we have to base it off a certain study. And so this kind of acts as a backdrop of what we're going to do. And from here, we are only allowed to choose 2 groups, control and experiment. There's not that many variables that we can play into, so that eases the process somewhat. But the most difficult aspect is once you have, someone might think of a great topic that they can do, but the difficult part is with our resources within a school environment, is being able to bring this topic to life and actually create a experiment off of it with our limited resources. I think that'd be the biggest problem.
Yeah, there's also only so many types of experiments you can run, and usually it's basically limited to like PowerPoints, videos, or questionnaires. So there are some unique experiments, but typically they all kind of fall into certain categories.
Okay. You can't starve your fellow students to get good results.
You know, it would be interesting, but I don't think that's for high school level.
Another question?
Your internal assessment and your extended essay are both graded, are a grade in class, correct? And then, no.
The internal assessment is, the teachers grade the internal assessment, and then IB requests a sample of our graded internal assessments, and they go off to a moderator who checks our grading to make sure that they're accurate and correct in the way that they should be. Whereas the extended essays, we give a predicted grade at the end of the process. We submit that, but then they are graded externally by someone else from IB.
And are they looked at together, like the students? No.
No, they're graded by different people.
In different places in the world.
Yeah,
right.
All around the world.
I'm just curious if your study of Freud found any correlations with biological or behavioral / cognitive research.
For the most part, no. I mean, there was some validity to some of his ideas, but most of them were pretty far out there.
We had to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. He was the founder, so I guess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering if your work here in psychology makes any of you aspire to a career in psychology. One of the reasons I ask questions, my daughter, who also took psychology at Mendham High School, is now a senior in college, majoring in psychology, and it causes me some concern.
Yeah, I plan to double major in history and psychology when I get to
The history will be
college.
helpful.
I want to be a teacher.
And isn't there recent research about memory, even on the lineup with police? Did you come across that at all, how they're basically discounting police lineups because of false memory?
Since mine was more of an internal, it was more about the research, the actual experiment, not so much like an extended essay where I investigated various sources. But I have seen that as validating why this research should be done, because there's a lot of things where someone could be so sure that something happened, that's so sure that this person did it, and other factors could be leading to their such firm belief, but really it's a false memory. I didn't come across that specifically, but I'm sure it's applicable to what this came, because it's similar to the eyewitness testimonies and such.
Brian.
I just forgot to say one thing, that for one of my college interviews, they asked if you'd ever have partaken in any research, because it was for a research university. And the fact that I did the extended essay and the internal assessment really helped me, because if you don't have anything to say for that, it's great that you might want to do research, but the fact that you've actually done it is definitely something that they were surprised about and they were happy to hear.
Okay. Where was that?
That was for Johns Hopkins.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you all so very much for coming out. I appreciate it.
Trevor, can I add, I talked to your mom this morning, and she had no idea what your topic was or that you had won an award.
Yeah,
So, as a mom, I would say I'm sure she would love to know.
yeah. I didn't really tell her much.
I gathered.
I also wanted to report out on our initiative with our constituent K-8 districts regarding Chinese language instruction in the district. There was an ad put online this week for a teacher of Mandarin in our schools, and we've already gotten resumes in, and the ad will go into print next week, and I'm certain that we will have a number of candidates. And I know that this initiative, unique with our K-8 districts, is one in which we know that there will be a cohort of students coming in from Mendham and Chester ready to take Chinese, and we will have new students who have never studied Chinese studying it here at Wmrhsd Central. So that is on the way. You'll also note the board in the packet and on the table outside that our district is offering an IB Theory of Knowledge course for adults in our communities. We've offered a Theory of Knowledge course for teachers in the past, and it was very, very well received. And a couple of board members and some community members. Mr. Dumovic, you were the first person to sign up for the course. Thank you very much. So at this point, we have about 20 people signed up. We'd like a few more if possible. The course topics are listed, and it certainly is available to anyone. And if you can't make every one of them, it's not a problem, and there are no tests. And I want to thank Dr. Hunter and Debbie Gonzalez and Tim Reimer and Kathleen Cremens and Joe Geddes and Aaron Feltman and Mackie Pendergrass for helping me put this together. Thank you all very much for that. Yes, Marcia. You also signed up.
Yes, I
Thank
did
you.
sign up. But just kind of related, when I was at back-to-school night in Mr. Quinn's classroom, him of the Quinn legacy, he's a physics teacher at Mendham. He's a terrific teacher. So as I was chatting with him afterwards, I said something about, my daughter really likes your class. It sounds so exciting. I would love to sit in on one of your classes. And he said, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I'm going to put that up to the idea pipeline. So if you ever see that come through, I think it's a terrific, you could go audit a couple of your kids' classes and
When I
related.
began at Mendham 34 years ago, there was one day a year where they had set aside at the time, students would stay home and their parents came to school for the day. And it wound up being about half the class at that time. So it was something that did exist in the district.
You could have students bring your parents to school.
Bring your parents to school.
Trevor get that right out.
Finally, I included in the board packet a letter from Wmrhsd Central teacher Jeff DeLillo, who is acting as principal at the Kapila Valley School in Nepal that was founded by Maggie Doyne, Wmrhsd Mendham graduate. And I thought that I might read it and found out that Jeff was in the United States at this moment and was promising to be here this evening and is not yet. So I would respectfully ask the board that at some point tonight, if he is able to show up, which he said he would, that he could give us a report. I was able to speak to him a little bit about his role as principal of the Kapila Valley School, and it was fascinating and illuminating. So I'll put that on hold.
Save that.
Okay. And that's it. Old business.
Old business, okay. All right. Then at this time, I'd like to open to the public. Please state your name and town and limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Comments or questions? All right, if there are no comments or questions, I will close to the public and we will move forward with our agenda. Does anybody have anything to remove from the consent agenda? Jackie, I'll start with you.
No, I don't. I placed my one question.
Tom?
Everything of mine was answered.
John?
I had a question, but Doug helped me out, so I'm okay.
All right. Dave?
Personnel 1 and 2.
Personnel 1 and 2, thank you. Jim?
Program number 2.
Okay. Joe?
I reviewed the bill list. Took me about 18 hours. Fun times for us. Next person has it. Doug had about 12 questions and answered all of them, so thank you, Doug.
Okay. Thank you. Jamie?
2 things. Business Operations 8, I'd like to be excluded, and in addition, I'd like to let Jackie, Tom, and John know that I am very interested in hearing what your questions are and what the answers are for either this meeting or for future reference.
Not interested in mine.
On the bill list. I have confidence in you, Joe.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Not us, John.
I'll tell you what my question was. It was why did we lose a point on QSAC for physicals? For and the answer was that we could have claimed it because we provide the ability for all of our staff to have physicals done every year through our insurance program, but the thought was we don't mandate it. So that's why we excluded it and didn't take the point.
And also the way the report is structured is that
it's all or nothing.
Yeah, all or nothing. And we do have some of our staff that is mandated to get physicals. But as Kristen has indicated, that all of the staff have access to that, but it's optional.
No, I appreciate that, Kristen. And there was a second item on their binary scale of 1 or 0 that we got 0 on. What was the explanation for that one?
That was number 9.
That was that written.
We don't have a board-approved
Comprehensive guidance plan. We never had one.
And to your point, Jamie, those were my 2 questions also.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
That's why I pulled the question.
Jamie, do you want to know what my question was?
Yes, please.
It was personnel number 11 on page 6. I asked why we had 6th period assignments. And Dr. DiBattista answered.
And what was the answer?
The cover for a teacher who was out.
Pardon me?
The cover for a teacher who was out, ill.
Great, thanks. You want to join in, John?
Sure. I asked about QSAC, about the nature of the self-assessment, and when the follow-up might take place. That was it.
Jamie, did you have any questions to pull besides business ops number 8?
No, that's it.
Okay, Marcia, I didn't get to finish with you.
And I know that, Tom, sometimes you CC me on your emails when you ask questions, so I appreciate that, but I don't have anything on the consent agenda.
Okay. Great. Would somebody move consent agenda item number 2? Thank you, Joe.
Second.
Thank you, Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, business ops number 8 is on page 3. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
For the benefit of those who don't have it in front of them, Business Ops number 8 is a list of proposed trips and the expenses associated with them. And one of the items, number 3, is a Glazier football clinic in Baltimore, Maryland for $2,816. And the motion for this says that these items promote the delivery of instruction or further the efficient operation of the school district. My question is, how will this trip promote the delivery of instruction or further efficient operation of the school district?
First of all, for number 3, I talked to Dr. Diabetes before, that's $329. It says each, that's for all. Microphone, please.
So to repeat, that it's $329 for all, so we can take about $900 out of that, a little over $900 out of that total?
Correct, so that's for all.
So what does that make the total? I don't have my calculator.
1829, I think,
Okay.
in my head.
And how will this trip promote the delivery of instruction or further the efficient operation of the school district?
Well, I think any of the budget every year, there's money set aside for coaches to go to workshops. This is in this case, some of that money is coming from the sports budget and some is coming from the professional development budget. And I think anytime you have a sports clinic, it has to do with the proper techniques and the health and safety of the kids and the promotion of a total student in extracurriculars. Is that?
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to ask, is this offered to Mendham coaches also?
Yes.
I was just going to say, comparing the records of the 2 football teams last fall, I'm wondering whether we ought to also include the Mendham coaches in this clinic.
Actually, Mendham coaches go, and the Booster Club, I think, in Mendham pays for that.
That was my other point, is it seems like an expense perhaps a booster club could pick up. But in Mendham, they did pick it up. In Central, they did not pick it up?
Yeah, I don't know much about the Booster Club relationship with the coaches and what they're paying for in this case.
But what you're saying, for Mendham High School, the Booster Club pays for it, and Central High School comes out of the district budget?
Yes, that's the case.
And no explanation for why one is treated that way?
It's what they submitted. It's what they asked for. In Mendham, you have coaches apply to go to all sorts of clinics and workshops. In Central, you have all sorts of coaches apply. They both apply. They both have the same amount of dollars to ask to go for workshops. In this case, this is what they do in Central. In Mendham, coaches, you can see Coach Hamlin is down there as well. So it's up to the coaches and their motivation, their desire to go to workshops, to apply, to make the request, and then it goes through that process. It's the same amount of money in both. And it's up to the coaches and their choices and their discussions with the athletic director to where they go.
Sure, but just so I understand, what I hear you saying is that coaches from both schools are going to go to this clinic. In one case, the district is going to pay for it. In the other case, The parents are going to pay for it.
But that might be reversed if you go to lacrosse, or that might be that, you know, the Mendham lacrosse parents might pay for something. I don't know what the booster clubs do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand.
So, but you're saying that, that both schools have equal pools from which to draw, and so it's, if they want to do additional stuff, sometimes it's balanced, and booster clubs support some of those.
Mm-hmm.
So if this request was turned down by this board, perhaps those coaches could approach their booster club and ask for them to pay for it. I mean, there is a recourse because it's available at Mendham, so.
I don't know the relationship between those coaches and their booster clubs.
And I don't think we as a board necessarily know then what booster clubs'
Correct.
total support is in either building, so to start pulling things away because they need to be parity on a sport-by-sport basis isn't necessarily the best way to approach that.
There's a process for workshops, there's a process for clinics, it goes through the process. There's a certain budget that's set aside, the board approves every year to go to workshops, whether those are for instruction, for sports. And that goes through, in this case, it'll go for sports, it'll go from the coach to the athletic director, then to me. And when it's workshops, it goes from the teacher to the principal to me.
And at your last professional development day, didn't you offer a class on, I mean, wasn't there, I think I remember reading something about coaching and it kind of sounded the same thing, the educational value, what you can get out of coaching, here's how you can, improve your coaching.
I think,
So,
I'm sorry.
is that correct at your last professional development day? Was that not offered?
That's correct. We worked pretty hard on creating a soft initiative on coaching and the educational mission. Although I think in this case, this is particular to football, where we were dealing with a variety of issues that coaches have to work with day in and day out, and that ranges from safety to health to communication with students, with parents, but as well as other important values that reflect the educational mission of the district.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I would like, if it's in order, to make a motion to amend this motion, to amend it by excluding number 3 on this motion, the Glacier Football Clinic for the Wmrhsd Central football coaches.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion about Jamie's motion to exclude number 3, attendance at the Glacier Football Clinic by the football coaches.
If we do not pass this, then they do not go to this clinic because, or we could perhaps, we do have another meeting before then.
But it's days before, I believe. January 30th is our next meeting.
So this is one piece of a bigger pie of how money is spent on athletics within the coaches' budgets.
Athletics, and I mean, I think you could take that argument out to a bigger, and it continues the ongoing discussion of how money is spent at both schools, not just on athletics.
So we're going to, if we go along with this, we're picking out one particular incident when there may have been other opportunities like this prior to now and in the future. So will we then pull out every one of them if we pull out this one?
Perhaps what's different about this one is we do actually know that one booster club did pay, the other booster club did not pay. I mean, I think that is, that sits on my mind.
Things are not done equally sometimes at both schools because of the way some sports have evolved over time. Something starts at one school sometimes before it starts at another. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe we should look into it a bit, but I don't think that it's ever going to be completely equal right now. There are differences.
There are, absolutely there are. And I think that if we wanted to start doing that, we should get a better idea of what the whole picture is, instead of just picking out one and excluding that. Then we really need to know we know that the pool of money, Mackey's just said, the pool of money for each school is equal. So, are we as a board in charge of deciding how to spend that money at this level, or are we in charge of making sure that the schools are well-run?
The answer to your question is we have a motion in front of us that we have to decide on. We have to vote yes or no.
And we're discussing that motion right now. Yes, Jim?
I think this is a clear case of the board trying to micromanage if you're trying to remove an item like this, and I couldn't agree with it at all. We've told that the amount of money is equalized at both schools, and I think that's all that needs to be said. I call the question.
All right, all in favor of the motion to exclude number 3?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Any abstentions? Then back to the main question, approving the travel-related expenses. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? All right. We will move on to program number 2.
Make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Discussion. The CUSAC? Yes, Jim?
Apparently, we all had questions on both number 5 and 12, and 5 was answered. 12, is there a reason that we should be going forward and developing a board-approved comprehensive guidance and academic counseling program for all students?
There's no requirement to have that. This CUSAC summary that you have in front of you is essentially a bench audit of what we had already done 2 years ago. And we did not have one 2 years ago. There's no state requirement to do one. And so it was simply something that we lost the points on because we don't have them. If this board would like to explore creating that sort of a document as you move forward with CUSAC, we're certainly able to do that. We will return to the CUSAC process in 2 years. So next year, you'll also be approving a bench audit like this. If you would like me to experiment in terms of finding out what different districts do with that, I'll be happy to look it up and provide you copies and samples of what that sort of a plan could look like.
I think that sounds like a good idea, just to even know. Will next year's bench audit cover the same items?
Yes.
Okay. And I think it's a good idea, just see what it is that we're missing. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Personnel number 1 on page 4. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom.
Second.
Thank you, Dave. Discussion?
With regret.
Duly noted. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Personnel number 2, also on page 4.
So moved.
Thank you, Tom.
Second.
Thank you, Jackie. Discussion?
With regret.
Thank you, Dave. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Before we move on to old business, I noticed that Jeff Colello, principal of Coquila Valley School and Westmore Central history teacher, is in the building. So if you could come up to the microphone and give us an update, that would be great.
Jeff, I had planned to read your letter to the board. I provided them with a copy, and you kindly agreed to appear here this evening. So please.
I'm so glad you did that because these are new, huh? This is nice. Because I wanted to go off the letter anyhow, and I wanted to first apologize for being late. I was double booked and invited to speak at former student Stephen Bursler's services this evening, of which the family was very grateful that so many came out in support from our community, especially Dr. DiBattista and Mrs. Forrester, who they noted were there earlier today. So I'm very thankful for you making this opportunity, or giving me this opportunity and making this time for me. So I'm out in Surkhet, Nepal, and it is in the far west corner, as many of you know, with Ms. Maggie Doyne from Wmrhsd Mendham High School. And I'm here to tell you a couple of things. And the first is that if we could keep track of how many of our students from Westmoreland Central and Wmrhsd Mendham go on to do remarkable, life-changing things in the world, I think that we would have a hard time making time to recognize it. She's had 8 students there from Wmrhsd Mendham and Westmoreland Central since she opened her doors 6 years ago. And in those 6 years, she has created an oasis in Western Nepal. And what a lot of people don't realize is that she's drawing from some of the most remote, isolated areas of the world in that region. And she has 42 children living in residence who I can name by name and have all the aspirations for a bright future that they would not have been afforded otherwise if not for her efforts and the efforts of so many people from our community who have supported her. And I think the most important anecdote I could provide to you today before I tell you a little bit about my own experience and contributions there is that I have been alongside her. She's never been to college. She has a Wmrhsd Mendham graduation under her belt and so much world experience now, being asked to speak all over the world, both nationally and internationally. In fact, when I was there initially in September, she was in Thailand speaking in a foreign organization of collection of NGOs that work with third world education in the world. And she was a keynote speaker at the age of 26. The anecdote is that there's not an opportunity that she misses to speak to the Board of Education, which I've had 3 opportunities to speak to in Nepal, where she speaks fluently, by the way, Nepali, or other instances where she doesn't mention quite clearly that the education she's provided here in our district and the teachers that she had here and the quality of instruction that she had here and the support that she had here has single-handedly been her greatest inspiration. And I know personally that not only does she not mind my sharing that, but she's instructed me to make sure that I make that very clear when I told her I might have an opportunity to speak to you via email. And so she sends her best regards. I'm so grateful for this experience. When I requested in writing a leave of absence from Anthony, it was very late in the game, I know. And it's something that usually would come by in November of a year, and I was coming so much later than that. And his immediate response was one of a positive nature that he knew that this board would support. And I'm so glad that he was so supportive of my wanting to do it and that you in turn were so supportive of my doing it. I've been there since September. I've been home since Christmas Eve. I leave this Saturday. I teach conversational English to 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. We have 265 children. I'm also the principal of the school. And we're growing in huge leaps and bounds. We have land that's going through the process of being purchased with the support of American, Australian, New Zealand dollars, as well as many European nation dollars, as well as local dollars that are very few to spare that are being put into the project. We're adding children to the home and creating 2 separate homes as we speak. We're drilling a well for water as we speak, which is a great asset there and not easily come upon, especially potable water. And I've been there long enough to have experienced a number of life-changing things that are both cultural and emotional with people who live in the third world and on the very edge of civilization in so many different ways. But I think the most interesting thing was my fear going there was, especially meeting her board for the first time, which was something I did in the third week of being there, is that there are so many universals about communities. And one of the most important universals, I think, is everyone wanting the best for their children. And I had an opportunity to speak to the board, all of whom speak Nepali and not know English. And I'm speaking in English through a translator, and so it's a nervous circumstance for me, a little bit nerve-wracking. And I noted very quickly, especially in our discussion afterwards, how many appreciated that I was there and had this trust that what we're doing there is for the very best for their kids and their children and their community. And I reflected to them being here in front of you in the past and how many similarities exist. They have a great affection for or affinity for American systems and are fascinated by them. And I spoke to them of the commitment of so many members of our community to make sure that our educational communities continue to thrive and that our teachers continue to be supported and that our students continue to be supported in a very real way. And it's been what I thought was going to be a divide of a barrier of communication has been a great unifier of communication. And I really feel coming from a community where education is so valued has really transcended to my experiences there. So just to give you a few highlights, while I'm there, the rotating schedule that we have here at Westmore Central is now alive and well in Coquille Valley at Westmore Central, Westmore Mendham. So we have our stamp on there in so many different ways, including that. Everyone already ate lunch at the same time because we provide lunch for every child. But the schedule was the same periods every day in the traditional style, and we've since rotated that out to provide for our neediest children, so many of whom have very limited experience with English or even struggle in their own language, Nepali, as well as math skills. But they're making amazing strides there. And the educational quality that she has created there and that continues to be fostered there is really a beacon of hope in that region of the country. And there are so many people coming to see it. Since I've been there for 4 months, we have had more than a dozen foreign organizations and national organizations coming to see what it is that Coquille Valley is all about, and getting ideas and asking questions and asking to work with the kids from Great Britain, from Australia, a number from India and from Nepal, trying to duplicate what has been created there. And so I guess that's the most important thing I wanted to share tonight is that we have students, especially Maggie, but so many others as well, who have contributed to this and many other projects, who are making a true difference in the world. And I applaud the efforts that we continue to make in the Wmrhsd district. So thank you very, very much, and I'll certainly be welcome to answer any specific questions you might have. I don't know how much time you have that I could take up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a few questions. Are many of your students from the indigenous Sherpa peoples? Mm-hmm. And what's your primary method of funding for this?
Yeah, wonderful question. Thank you. So the caste system that exists in Nepal is very similar to that in India, and Sherpas are of the lowest caste, and about a third of all of our students come from the lowest caste. Every student is on scholarship. We have 265, as I noted, and that's very purposeful. We're not trying to grow too fast, too quickly, so we are very conscious about the need is so enormous that if we wanted to tomorrow create an enrollment, we could have 1,500 students in a moment. So the quality of education is vital to its success, and certainly it's Maggie's main focus. So we continue in that way. As far as the, I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question? I forgot. Funding. The funding, I apologize. The funding, there's two organizations in essence, cleverly created, and all legally, of course, but cleverly created. There is the non-for-profit NGO that exists in Nepal, Coquille Valley Children's Home and School, and then there's the non-for-profit that exists in the United States called Blink Now. And Blink Now is the financial arm for Coquille Valley, and the vast majority of her regular donations, which are monthly and in the 5 figures, come directly through long-term sponsors who give a monthly sponsoring amount, as well as individuals who individually sponsor students of ours. And like you may have seen on TV and et cetera, but I've seen it in person, so I know it's 100%. The actual dollar for dollar goes directly for the child whose picture you get. They get a photo, and the child sends some information and little cards and this type of thing to sponsors who are generous enough to provide a monthly stipend specifically for their allotment in school. And there's so much that's provided through that. For a few $100s a year, we're able to give a child a meal every day that for most of them is their only meal. We're able to give them 2 uniforms, which in many instances is their only clothing, outside of just a few other things. And most importantly, of course, we're able to educate them and a high quality of education at that. So it's a very, very impressive. I can't say enough of the accolades you've heard are truly not enough for Maggie directly and for the whole project in general. Yes, sir.
How's each child picked? How do you go through the process?
On 3 levels. Merit is one of them, but not the singular decision maker. So that's one component. The other is need. And believe it or not, in that part of the world, very difficult as it might be, to separate between what you and I would consider to already be a gross need and even a more significant need is a very real thing. So there are individuals who we turn away at times, which I do with my heart in my throat, because at some point you have to make a distinction between someone who has nothing and someone who has less than nothing. And so the vast majority are orphaned, displaced, refugees at times, sometimes living with a grandparent, sometimes living with an aunt and uncle, sometimes living by themselves, of which I have 13 students who are under the age of 13 and living alone. 3, in fact, a 9, 11, and a 12-year-old live completely alone. So there's a great deal of challenge in that process, but it's when you see the guiding idea behind keeping it small and building over time, it's an important one to hold to. I believe wholeheartedly in that approach that she's put in place. Yes, ma'am.
Who does all her administration of the fundraising and sending out the photos? And is that Maggie herself, or is it volunteers, or is it paid staff?
That's a great question as well. She has, it's really a family operation in some ways. She went there with the great support of her family, and they have helped out in so many different ways. If you email Maggie, 9 times out of 10, you'll be getting an email that her father wrote and that she has added to, because her dad is very much part of assisting her with correspondence. She gets thousands of emails a week, so no one person or no collection of volunteers really could help to both do what it is that she would intend for the response to be, and at the same time, help her with the clearinghouse that needs to occur there. From the Chester, Washington Township, Mendham communities, so many people have offered support. Her board in the city is made up of some, I'm going to guess, I don't hold me to this number, but some 70% families from these 3 communities, or 5 communities if you include the borough township relationships. And so she has many hands there, but she's certainly, in control and directly involved in each one of those components. But she has a lot of support, which is perhaps even more amazing to the story. I imagine it is commonplace to a certain extent for students to go on to do amazing things in foreign countries. And maybe not to this extent, maybe, I don't know, but to have the support of the community from home, that the way they've rallied around her, I think has got to be a very, very unique study. Yes, sir.
2 questions.
Yes.
First question, how has this changed your life?
I said to Roseanne LeChatton, a good friend of mine and a mentor, I said, if I had known that there were doors you could open in your life that you couldn't later close, I'm not sure I would have had the courage to go to begin with. It's when you're working in a part of the world where everything about your experiences are questioned, you're as likely to see a child dead on the side of the road as you are an animal. That's very difficult. The idea that you have to look at a student, and we have a special needs student. I was just telling Michelle Monge earlier today, we have a special needs student who is 11 years old in a first grade class. And the bright people were having a discussion about whether or not she should take up one of our 265 seats. And she remains after a lot of discussion. And when you have a community of so many who want to be educated, and these children truly want to be educated, the children themselves are trying to get in. Forget about parents trying to get them in. The children are trying to get into the door. That's a very real challenge to deal with as well. It's one thing to turn away a parent. It's a whole other thing to turn away a child, So to answer your question, I guess in a roundabout way, it has changed me, I think, in 1,000 little ways, in many big ways, and in many ways that I don't even, I think, recognize yet, and probably won't until I've done the complete experience and back in July. But I think the most important way it has changed me is that the way in which I view education for our students here has completely changed. Our global perspective needs to be on a whole different level than we even attempt to make it.
Very proud of you.
Thank you.
Second question.
Ask, sir. Please.
Coming back next year?
I have absolutely every intention, if you'll have me back, of returning. Yes.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you. No, I am. I really feel that this experience is an extension of what I've been afforded here, and the experience I have had here. I'm a graduate of Wmrhsd Central, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud to be there working with a graduate of Wmrhsd Mendham so closely, and other graduates from many of whom could have been my students, and to watch their interaction brings a sense of fulfillment to me that as an educator you probably are never afforded in your career or your lifetime. So yes, I'm coming back if you'll have me, definitely. Yes, sir.
Along with northern India, Nepal is a hotbed of Maoist guerrilla activity and just political unrest in general. How does the school deal with that?
It's an amazing question, Brian. Thank you. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And as you might know, there are 7 factions at play, especially in that region of Nepal. And it's added to not only the Maoist situation, but there are so many Tibetan refugees that have been pushed into northwestern Nepal because of the conflict with China. So we have individuals, Maoists and others, who walk down our town streets, city streets, but not to our sense of what a city might be, with machine guns and the type of thing. And you get used to it to a certain extent, but you never truly get used to it. And you have a sense that your students that go to your school are always in some sense of danger, or at least to our standard. And so we do our best to be very quick with absences, to make sure that we're doing home visits. We have a very comprehensive now, which is about a month and a half old, home visit program. If a student's absent more than one day, there's no phoning in and saying my son or daughter is going to be absent, let alone many of them don't have parents. So, but my nephew or niece or what have you, there's no phones. They have no phones. So we have no ability to have a record of whether or not this is a good absence or not, or a bad absence. And so we just take notation that they're absent, and if they're absent twice in a row, then I will or someone else will go and track down where they're at and see what the story is. And 9 times out of 10, so many of the children have, for instance, everything from their dad wanted them to come today to beg with him because children bring more money, to they were traveling somewhere to visit someone, which is a 5-day walk, or what have you, or so they get caught up. And so we've had some extended absences that we didn't know about that were in that nature. But it's very difficult to deal with that situation. It certainly is. I'm hopeful that the current government, which is a little bit more stable than it was a year ago, will continue to see the importance in education and in law enforcement. And currently, Surkhet is the largest growing city in western Nepal. And so it's become, when I was there 2 years ago, when the district first sent me. The changes have been astronomical as far as growth. And just now are some of the infrastructure systems, especially policing, coming to meet the new needs or the increased needs. And I'm hopeful that continues to be an answer to that continued conflict. Thank you for your social awareness, by the way. Yes, sir.
As you see the children graduate or graduating classes right now, what are they? How are they? They coming back to the school, or are they bringing? Are they going out and saying more to the school? Or?
That's a magnificent question. Actually, we haven't had a graduating class yet because we're catching up to our students. We are adding a educational year for every year our oldest student's age. So we have 8th graders, and next year there'll be 9th graders, and we don't yet have a 9th grade. So that's where the growth is truly unprecedented. I mean, we're working almost faster than we can catch up with ourselves, if that makes sense. So we're always, grade 10 is a high school education there, and really they're equivalent at the end of school. We're hopeful that we can get a more traditional education to a 12th grade and send them on to college at either in Kathmandu or perhaps New Delhi. Which is a long goal. However, Maggie already has over 60 children whose college education has already been sponsored from foreign sponsors, and many of those children are less than 4 or 5 years old. So we keep plugging along to an ideal that seems to be a great challenge, but some way she makes it all possible. So, and the support of foreign aid certainly from this community and beyond. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
How many staff members, how many teachers do you have for the
We have, so when I went there, little did I know that we didn't actually have a position for a principalship, so to speak. Those were all things that were created after the fact. So we currently have 4 positions for foreign support, principal, as well as 2 teachers who teach English and English grammar, as you might suspect, as well as a house manager, someone who oversees the home, and also helps with a few small assistants in the school as well. But outside of that, we currently have 18 teachers, 6 support staff members, and 5 or 6 custodial staff and grounds staff, and we're growing that. So. Hold on and ask again in a year, and we might have a significantly higher number.
Jeff, can you explain the novels for Nepal?
Yes, absolutely. I am so thankful that so many members of my colleagues here in both Wmrhsd and Wmrhsd Central have flooded my inbox with requests to assist, as Maggie has already experienced prior to being sent there 2 Aprils ago, where I was there for 3 weeks to run a teacher in service that you all graciously gave me an extension on spring break to do. But so many other ways, teachers, former students offering in so many different ways. So this latest initiative is really led by Anna Lynch's classes here and a few other classes, both at Mendham and Central, who are helping to replenish our library. If you wanted to send a heavy box of books to me, it's probably a little over $1,000 and may or may not get to me. And at one point, it's going to be on a bus that has livestock on it, so it's very questionable. But if I accompany it, it's about $7 per bag extra, which is nominal thanks to the aid of others, financial aid of others. And so we're able to go with an assistance of a courier from airport to airport, and we'll be bringing a great deal of books back. And I think, if my estimation is correct, from the books we've already collected, we'll almost double our current size of our library from just my trip home, which is something that I'm very grateful for and very, very thankful about. I'll tell you one of the most interesting quick anecdotes related to books is I had a first grader. I've never taught in any child from nursery to 8th grade, and I wasn't sure how all that would work out. I had a first grader who came in crying, and she said that she had some very upsetting news, that she had stolen 2 books from the library yesterday, the day earlier. And I was kind of smiling, trying not to to brush her off or to make her think it wasn't serious because it's stealing and so on and so forth. But I thought it was so funny that she's kind of turning herself in, so to speak. And she said, we had given them students lanterns that run on solar power so that they can do their homework at night. And she said, ever since I've got this lantern, I've just been so wanting to read more and more. And I said, I explained to her, that's not stealing, that's borrowing. And I said, I can't do it with every student, but you can borrow 2 books a week. And so that's kind of changed her whole outlook on life. But could you imagine for 2 books? But yeah, so it's a great initiative, and I'm very thankful for the support here to make it work.
Jeff, thank you for coming out this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Old business is not going to top that, I can guarantee. But we do need to move on to old business. Dave, can we start with you? Policy?
I have to follow that.
Sorry, somebody does.
Well, we have had the exciting task of updating the policy manual, which has been going on since I started here in 1973 and has never finished. But there is an end game that is on the horizon. We are working with school boards, and we are trying to complete this task as quickly as possible for obvious reasons. So Marcia and John and I, along with Anthony, are working along with school boards not to change the meaning of any of the policies. That is not our intent. But I have a 20-page document that is a working document that we use that was given to us by school boards as far as what changes have been made. And we have all been going through the book. I've noticed some of Marcia's questions, which are good. It's wonderful, and we are continuing to do that. Some of the categories are mandated policies, monitored policies, critical other, required regulations, file code numbers if different, so we're trying to align the code numbers to be proper, and then discretionary policies. So this 20 pages of documents that we also have a copy of the proposed manual that we're going through. I don't know about the two of you, but it's quite a tedious task. And we are reviewing each of these and trying to bring it to a point where we can bring it to the board. We're hoping to do that. I don't know about January. I think that's probably too optimistic, but I would think the meeting after next. I don't know. I haven't talked to Marcia or John about it, but I don't know if you share my view there.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
It's actually exciting to see new policy there, and some of them are really needed policy, and if you compare the old policy to what we're going to be able to work with, I mean, it's really quite professional, and, just it needed to be done.
It looks like it's been, legally gone over, and the proper terminology and the updates and all of that is in there, which I agree with you. I think it's a needed process, and I think it's just the review that we need to do is going to take some time. And I know the three of us are going through it as quickly, along with Anthony. We're going through this as quickly as we can to try to finish this task. But when we're finished, it will be a quality document.
And when we're finished, we're going to put the entire policy online.
Great.
I had one question for Anthony. As I was going through some of those new policies, and in the language of the policy, it now requires a report to the board.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, are you keeping track of that? Are we keeping track? Like, who is noticing in the body of the policy, like an attendance policy, now you have to give a report of staff attendance monthly to the board? So is that you?
Dave and I have decided that what we would like to do is sit down with the policy manual and get that list of notes that you have, and I've noticed some other things about attendance issues that are in there, and get a sense of, do we want to do those? Are they mandated or are they suggested? And then bring that back to our policy committee and move from there.
Because I noticed the same thing, and I mentioned it. Matter of fact, I spoke to Anthony, I think, last week, and there are so many requirements that I think once we've completed this task, I think information, the administrators need in service on this. They're going to need to be updated. A lot of these policies require things that may have been in policy before, but I don't know if they're mandated, and really, I don't know. And so not only the administrators, but I think the teaching staff needs to be made aware of some of the policies so that they're updated also. So I've noticed the same things that you're talking about, and we all see the same things. So that's on the horizon.
But there's also policies in there that I think parents will be happy that we have in there, you know, all the cell phone texting. The social media policy is now there, which, you know, if you read it, the policy limits, I think it's 3 emails between teacher and student. I mean, it's pretty, I'm not sure I could keep my emails to 3. So, I mean, there's certainly things in there that are going to, you know, cause people to take note and
the teachers using Facebook, you know, pro or con to be Facebooking with students. There are things that I think, I'm sure most teachers are aware, but it certainly doesn't hurt for us to just have some type of in-service where teachers are informed concretely that these things are policy, and just to update everything.
Would it be helpful to do a type of a spreadsheet with the policies and who's responsible for actions or, you know, mandated reporting?
It's a big, yes.
I mean, I know that's a big,
kind of what I'm talking about.
It's a big undertaking, but yeah,
It's a
right.
huge undertaking. It would probably be like a summer kind of job for administrators, which you could spend weeks on. But I think something like that ultimately is
Right.
probably necessary.
Okay. And can you explain the difference between a mandated and a required policy?
No.
Okay.
I'm using the technology, the
right.
terms that our school board representative has been giving us.
Well, thank you. I know it's a huge undertaking, and it's so huge that it's been put off for many years, and we've never had the opportunity to do it as a start to finish, and instead of doing, you know, pieces along the way. So thank you for undertaking this. And thanks to you and Marcia and John as well. I think, does anybody else have anything in old business?
I had help.
Not old.
Not old, okay. The only, what did
I have
miss?
old.
Oh.
I did my online training for harassment intimidation policy. I guess because I'm a new member, I had to get that under my belt because it wasn't offered at our regular training that I took when I first joined. Anyway, one of the points that they made was the policy should have been developed at each school with a collaboration of parents, community representatives, administrators, volunteers, employees. When did that take place?
I'll let Dr. Lee answer that.
Worked with Dr. Hunter, and she brought it to the CAB committee, which has
That
key
representation.
stakeholders from each of those areas. And everyone got a copy, reviewed it, provided me with notes, questions if they had any.
But did we have that much leeway for their input on the policy?
No, I mean, the whole thing in terms of how it was rolled out from the state, it was here's some guidelines, this needs to be in place by September, but things weren't spelled out until it was pretty far along in the process. I remember attending a training in June, an auditorium filled with administrators where we were being told of some of these requirements, and people were saying, we've got summer, got one board meeting in the summer. Some districts only have one meeting in the summer between July and August. And there's 2 required readings in order for policy to go into effect. And they're thinking, we don't even have enough meetings to get this thing in place by September 1st. Everybody felt behind in the process based on how it was rolled out. But we did, that was our way of getting some input from.
And it also mentioned that we should develop a board oversight committee for that policy. Have you heard of that?
No, I mean, I would think that that would be the
The
policy
policy committee.
committee of the board.
Yeah,
And I do know that it is a policy that requires a revision on an annual basis, or at least to be reviewed annually.
And reported on biannually.
Correct.
And we have no funding for this
No.
extra work.
No, we do not.
All right, I have, for old business, Dr. Fyander has collected the resumes from our superintendent search. We have 8 resumes, and he has begun doing the background checks and screenings, and would like to schedule a meeting to present those to the board and to schedule training on structured interviews and sample questions with the board, and suggested any one of the next 2 Mondays, the 16th or the 23rd. Any thoughts on?
23rd would be preferable on my end.
Okay,
Either.
either?
16.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Anybody else have any preference?
Either.
Either?
Third.
23rd? 23rd's ahead. Jamie?
I don't have my calendar in front of me, so I'll have to get back to you.
Okay. Marcia? Okay. Well, I will contact him tomorrow and see. He had a possibility on one, but I'll see if we can lean towards the 23rd. And I will email everybody and let them know.
Fine. I did have one question.
Certainly.
I was surprised that, as in the ad, that it did not require a doctorate.
No.
Is there a reason for that?
Because it's not a requirement for the job. We can certainly keep that in mind as we go through the process. But
I'm trying to think of all the superintendents. I think we maybe had one that didn't have a doctorate degree. But he happened to be a major in the Army in World War II, so I think his leadership qualities were without doubt. So I was a little surprised at that. Just seems as though that would be a requirement for that position.
It's not a requirement for the position.
Our requirement.
Oh, our requirement. Well, we can always, what Dr. Fyander's suggestion was, and what Bill O'Brier's suggestion was also, when we had spoken to him, was to keep it broad, and then we can always know.
Are we still in old business?
Is there any other old business?
Well, I have one point on this. Will we include current district administrators as part of the pool of candidates for interim superintendent?
We're hiring a superintendent. This process is to hire a superintendent, so we haven't gotten to the point of determining if we need an interim yet.
Well, it was a suggestion that Dave made at the last meeting, that I supported at the last meeting. I want to repeat my support for that idea tonight. I think it's a good idea for the reasons that Dave described at our last meeting.
Well, everybody voted to go ahead with hiring the consultant to hire a superintendent, so that's the track that we're on.
Right, these two are not mutually exclusive. You can do
No,
both.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm suggesting that we do both. Actually, I'm supporting Dave's suggestion that we do both.
Well, right now, we still have a superintendent on the job, so that's not something that we need at this moment. But certainly, that's that, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss it as the board, as a full board, when we get there. But let's meet with Dr. Fyander first and see what our pool looks like and what our options are.
What do you think, Dave?
Well, I think we have 3 options. We can hire an outsider, we can hire an interim, or we can hire an acting from amongst the current current administrators. It doesn't have to be a district administrator. So they're the 3 areas that we have to choose from. As I said at the last meeting, my concern is the quality of applicants on the outside is not strong. If you looked at Sunday's Star Ledger, it was full of superintendent's ads.
Yes.
And also, our consultant is also hiring a superintendent for Mendham.
Yes.
So I don't know where I don't want to use the term loyalty, but I don't know where his priorities are as far as a superintendent for them, a superintendent for us. And my other issue, the one I said the last meeting, was that I am concerned that because of the tremendous turnover administratively that we've had, that's why I made the suggestion about possibly hiring an insider on a temporary basis. I'm not looking permanently, that we consider it. And I don't have a dark horse here. I honestly don't. But those were the reasons that I said it. It wasn't to be arbitrary or difficult or anything like that.
No, and I thought that they were good suggestions, and that's where we go. But at this point, we don't need an interim yet, and let's meet with Dr. Fyander.
So in other words, we would see the quality of...
See what the pool is, see what our options are as far as moving forward. And, like I said, we've got 8 resumes. That's in line with what he's been seeing recently. And he thought that we had some promising candidates in that pool.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Jackie?
To me, it would seem that we should get advice from Dr. Fyander, since he's the one right at the forefront of this process and would have more experience in what the status of things are, rather than to make decisions right now to go off in 3 different directions. Why don't we find out how necessary that looks, especially if we can do that in a week or 2.
Okay.
And
Yes, Marcia.
can if any current administrators are interested in the job, they would be submitting their resume to Dr. Fyander now also?
No, Dr. Fyander is not doing a search for an interim.
I'm not saying for an interim, for permanent.
For permanent, the ad was placed and that closed out on Friday, the 6th.
Right, but a current administrator could have put their resume into
Could
that.
have, absolutely, yes.
Okay. And I do have another piece of old business.
As do I. Go ahead.
Okay, well, you go first then.
I'm not sure we're done with this.
Okay.
If you want to raise
Are
it.
we,
Yeah, can I just do my old business? I did read in the Observer Tribune that the board would probably not act on Chester Borough's resolution, but I think that was premature since we hadn't even seen a copy of it, and it's here in front of me in the board packet now. So I would like to have a discussion on this resolution from Chester Borough.
That's new business?
Well, isn't it old because it's related to the superintendent hire?
But the resolution is new business.
Okay, well, I'll wait till new business then.
Okay.
Kristen, I've prepared a response to some of the comments from the public that we heard at the last meeting that I'd like to read.
What?
Prepared a response to some of the comments that we heard from the public at the last meeting.
Okay.
And I promise you that it won't take as long as some of the speakers that we heard at the last meeting. So is that okay if I read that?
Just for your information, I know that you had contacted me and said that I allowed speakers to go for more than 5 minutes, but I did watch the video, and I believe the only person who went over 5 minutes was Dr. Riley.
Great. At our last meeting, we heard from many members of the public speaking about a variety of topics. Without enough time to respond to the large volume of comments, I will instead try to address the common theme of most of the speakers. The common theme I heard at our last meeting was a defense of the status quo. We heard from retired Wmrhsd Central High School administrators and past Washington Township representatives on this board. We also heard from their constituents. We should not be surprised by their defense of the way things are, because for many years they have been tremendous beneficiaries of the status quo. Mendham and Chester residents pay nearly 2/3 of all taxes supporting this district and nearly twice as much per student as paid by Washington Township. With millions of dollars at stake, the vociferous nature of their complaints is not surprising. Residents of Mendham and Chester, however, tell me of their concerns about the decline of Mendham High School and about the rising cost to educate our high school students. Parents of Mendham High School students tell me that their educational and operational concerns about Mendham High School are largely disregarded by this district and its Board of Education. Comprised of many excellent teachers, Mendham High School faculty members tell me of their concern that greater financial resources are being devoted to Central High School, and I think we heard an example of that tonight. One of the most outspoken of those concerned is Mr. Gary Quam, Mendham High School's past music director for 36 years, who says the Mendhams and Chesters have been paying for a Cadillac and getting a Chevrolet, while Washington Township has been paying for a Chevrolet and getting a Cadillac. After hearing about these concerns, I asked our district business administrator, Doug Peckinack, for a breakdown of expenditures by high school for as far back as possible. Mr. Peckinack provided this data to all school board members last spring. And if you take the time to look at it, you'll see that these figures confirm that while Washington Township has controlled the district through its majority on the school board, more money has been spent by the district and its school principals at Westmore Central High School in aggregate and per pupil than at Mendham High School. Mendham Borough Mayor Neil Henry took the initiative to ask Executive County Business Administrator Ralph Goodwin to review these figures. Last summer, Mr. Goodwin traveled here to our district's business office to go over the numbers with Mr. Peckinack. In Mr. Goodwin's August 12, 2011 letter responding to the mayor's request, he does not dispute a single figure presented in this analysis of our district's spending by high school. Our district's commitment to perpetuating this spending inequality was apparent when this board adopted its goals earlier this year. I requested that the board set a goal of equal spending per student between the two district high schools. Only Chester's Marcia Asdale and I voted for a goal of equal spending per student at each of the two schools. The remaining board members voted against this reasonable request. Incidentally, Mrs. Asdale and I are the only board members whose children attend Mendham High School. What has been the performance of Mendham High School while under the control of Washington Township board members such as those we heard speak at last month's meeting? In 2002, the year my eldest son graduated, Mendham High School was ranked 4th in New Jersey among all public high schools. In 2004, the year my second son graduated, Mendham High School dropped to 20th in New Jersey. In 2006, the year my eldest daughter graduated, Mendham High School dropped again to 29th in this state. And in 2008, the year my second daughter graduated, Mendham High School dropped further to 38th in this state. It's currently ranked 26th. This widely accepted ranking is calculated by Monmouth University biannually. The defenders of the status quo point to two other surveys that rank Mendham High School higher. One is Newsweek, which excludes most other J schools such as Chatham, Mountain Lakes, Bernardsville, and Milburn that outperform Mendham High School. The second is the Washington Post ranking that only measures the number of AP, and IB tests per student given by each school. Not a measure of the overall quality of the school, according to the Washington Post. It does not indicate how students scored on these tests. On scholastic aptitude tests, Mendham High School students score 10th out of the 13 New Jersey high schools located in J communities, the state's socioeconomic designation for the Mendhams and Chesters. Mendham High School students score below nearby Bernardsville, Chatham, Mountain Lakes, and Milburn high schools, among others. I take no pleasure in seeing Mendham High School ranked near the bottom when compared to similar communities. I believe Mendham High School can do better. One factor contributing to Mendham High School's declining rank since 2002, the median verbal SAT scores of Mendham High School students have dropped steadily from 590 to 560. These SAT scores are posted on the New Jersey Department of Education's website for all to see. In addition, our superintendent provided these same scores to the board at a meeting last year. Some argue that this decline is insignificant. Parents of Mendham High School students, however, tell me that there are no more significant skills they want their children to learn in high school than to read and write well. These are important educational issues that this board needs to address. In these board meetings, we should not be discussing the $6.2 million subsidy that Mendham and Chester taxpayers send annually to Central High School. This is the amount by which Mendham and Chester High School taxes exceed the cost to educate Mendham and Chester High School students. Since this board has not allowed residents an opportunity to vote on the method of tax apportionment between towns, the optimal structure of our school districts has become an issue for our municipal governing bodies and our sending district school boards to explore. I trust they will allow voters a say on the matter. In the meantime, on this board, we must focus on delivering the best possible high school education to all of our children, on the east side as well as the west side of our district, within the real constraint of the limited financial resources of our taxpayers. Mendham and Chester residents are not satisfied with the status quo. We can do better, and our children deserve it.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure who that was responding to because I don't think Gary Quam was at our last meeting and some of the other people, but thank you very much. I know a lot of that
Excuse me,
information has been disputed in the past, and you're entitled to your opinion.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I kept good notes last week of all the speakers, and you said you wanted to comment about what they said. A lot of what you just said is material you've used before when you've spoken to the Mendham Township Committee maybe 2 years ago, and items that were printed when you ran for office. So that a lot of that, I would say 2/3 or more of that, the substance of that speech you just gave goes back to other stuff that had nothing to do with last week. And last week had a lot to do with the general nature of this school, general or the administration, and what parents feel. And not everyone was from Mendham and Chester, and so I don't think that response necessarily matches what we heard last week. Parts do, much of it doesn't, and we've heard it before. And it's very detailed, and it's very precise, and there are responses, but they cannot be provided at this moment because other people are not prepared to address all of it. And some of the information, well, it's taken in a certain context, and with the passage of time, things change.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, but not to the length that this response took.
What I said at the beginning of my statement is that the number of comments were too great. The volume was too large to respond to each individual item. So what I searched for was the common theme. And the predominant common theme that I heard at the last meeting were speakers defending the status quo. And that's what I chose to respond to.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
That's not what I heard at the last meeting. I mean, I don't have a list of what everyone said, but I think it was your personal style and your demeaning approach towards special education students that seemed to be a central focus of what was said by the parents. They even quoted things that you've said. So I don't think anyone disagrees with some of the statements you made, even though you've colored them in a way that's not accurate. I think it's your general attitude. We're here for all of our students. When I come to a board meeting, I'm not here for Wmrhsd Central. I'm here for both schools. And your interests are so parochial and so centered upon your own community that it doesn't help the board operate as a whole. That's my objection to what you said. Do I think that there is merit in some of what you said about the property taxes? Yeah, I think that's why our mayors are talking now. And that's why they're trying to work out a compromise that's satisfactory for all of us. So, yes, there is a kernel of truth in some of the things you say, but a lot of them are just completely false.
Could you identify a single thing I said that's inaccurate?
It's just too broad an area.
Can you identify
When you start
one
quoting
statement
Gary
I
Quam
made
about getting statistics from, that's just...
What statement is inaccurate, Dave?
I'm not going to go into individual things that you said.
I mean, I'm trying to think offhand now without that in front of me, but the quoting New Jersey Monthly, that's been debunked a number of times for the last 4 years. The quoting Ralph, saying that Ralph Goodwin didn't take exception with any of your CBS's data because that's what you provided to him. That is not what Ralph did not affirm your calculations or CBS's calculations.
Kristen, I don't know whether you or any other board member went through the numbers that Doug provided to all board members
Yes, I
last
did.
spring. That's exactly what the numbers were that Ralph Goodwin went through. They're identical.
Absolutely.
And there are no mistakes, no errors.
That's not, that wasn't what Ralph said, though. You're mischaracterizing Ralph's response to that.
I don't think so.
And and there's a lot more, but, being surprised with your speech and your opinions, it's hard to come up with all of the responses, as Jackie said, that we don't have all of the people in the room that have, we don't have Ralph here to respond to your claim about what he said.
Let's invite him to our next meeting, shall we?
I think we have other business that we need to do, but you can certainly do that, and Ralph has been to the district any number of times. Is that correct, Doug?
Been here, yes.
Okay. So, are there any other responses to that, or can we move on?
Move on.
Don't touch the table.
I'm not touching it.
Is there any other old business? The new business. Marcia?
Yes. Just the resolution from Chester Borough, I'd like to discuss that. I have it here in front of me, and it kind of ties back into the conversation between Amy and Dave, whereas if we could, I wasn't happy with my vote last time to vote to hire a consultant, and I discussed this with Dave. I thought his idea was good, and I should have supported that. So in reading this resolution from Chester Borough, I see a way that we could perhaps incorporate Dave's suggestion of hiring an existing administrator to be the interim superintendent, which would give Chester Borough until April of 2012 to seat a representative and vote on the new superintendent. Dr. DeBattista said in his public statement last month that the vote for a superintendent is one of the most important the school board has. I agree. I think it's it's a process that should involve a great number of people. Now, not having met with Dr. Fyander, I'm sure he will assert all those also. So, and I'm also sensitive to their statement that they haven't had a seat on this board, probably in error. In error. They should have. So I am amenable to this resolution, and I would be interested to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Marcia, didn't you seconded the motion to hire the consultant at our last meeting?
I probably did.
You did.
I'm saying I didn't like my vote.
I believe everybody except Dave voted in favor of that.
Exactly.
Of that motion. So now, 3 weeks later, you've changed your mind?
Well, I said I'm not happy with it, and originally when I communicated that to Dave just off the top of my head, I said, oh. And then I saw the resolution come forward. Until I read it in the Observer Tribune, I didn't know that this was in the works. I see it's dated December 20th, so it was just a couple days after our meeting. But I saw a way to perhaps honor the resolution and also take into account Dave's suggestions. So I'd certainly like to hear what everyone else has to say.
Marcia, and to all the board members, I got to answer some questions. We're not hiring. We haven't hired anybody yet. I mean, we're just bringing this up. We're seeing what's out there. I mean, it seems to me that Chester wants us to do something. Are we telling them what to do with their police force? Are we telling them what to do with their taxes? No, we're not doing that. I think we're just moving forward in a general manner the way we're supposed to as a board. I don't know what everybody else feels, but I'm not hiring a superintendent next week. We're seeing what's out there. Let's kick the tire.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Yes.
Do our Chester representatives represent Chester Borough as well as the township
They were
currently?
elected by Chester Borough and Chester Township.
So we really do have representation from the borough.
Absolutely. Maybe you don't feel you represent Chester Borough, but I've represented Chester Borough and Chester Township residents since I was first elected on the K-8 board many years ago, and I have continued to do so. And once any board member is elected to the Regional Board of Education, this sitting board, they represent all 5 communities. Read your oath of office.
Please, I don't need to be lectured. I don't think I need to be lectured about that.
Well, I'm just telling you what the oath of office is. Read it.
But Jim, I'm just bringing up this resolution for discussion. It's not, I don't
150
believe I'm being
All right.
confrontational.
I'm not
about
being
it.
confrontational.
But I'm getting that feeling that you
All
think
right,
I am.
let's go, let me have one more statement, then you can have a reply. 150 years ago, I don't know exactly the date, the state of New Jersey separated towns from boards of education. They did it for a purpose. This, I hate to say it, and I'm not trying to make enemies in Chester Borough, this is interference, period. Our board is in the process of hiring a new superintendent. We are not subservient to any community. We represent all. Read your oath of office.
I agree with Marcia that we don't need a lecture about the oath of office, and certainly we don't need a lecture from you, Jim, about how best to represent the interests of our constituents. I would like to rise in support of Marcia's motion, primarily because
Marcia didn't make a motion.
her imminent motion, largely because
I'm glad that you know that she's making a motion before she does.
I think I have the floor, don't I, Kristen, or not?
Yes, Jamie, you do.
Thanks. The reason I support Marcia's imminent motion is because Chester Borough has unjustly been denied exclusive representative on this board for at least the last 10 years. We haven't heard any explanation from the county superintendent of why Chester Borough has not gotten an exclusive representative. We've heard a lot of people talk at the last meeting about how important the hiring of a superintendent is, perhaps the most important task a school board has, and I think they deserve for us to wait for them to be represented on this board.
What happens if the legislature votes like they're supposed to do today or tomorrow to move elections until November? Then we don't have a superintendent for another year. Then we have no continuity. We have no transition.
The motion I'm supporting presumes the
speaking.
existing law.
I have the floor at the moment. Thank
Sorry, I
you.
thought you were asking me a question.
I haven't finished yet.
Okay.
If the elections move to November, then we have no continuity, we have no transition, we have, 2 or 3 people in the job in the space of a year and a half.
Don't the local boards of ed or the municipal bodies get to vote on whether to move into November? I don't think it's a
There's no
mandate.
law yet.
There's no law yet, so.
I thought that was the intention, was the boards could vote to move it.
Right, but there's an incentive to move it, because, financial incentive to move it, to save districts money, but in a regional district, all have to do the same thing.
The answer to your question, Kristen, is that Marcia's imminent motion presumes current law. It doesn't presume a change in the law.
The law could change by tonight, because they were supposed to vote on it tonight.
Correct.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to accept.
Can we, is discussion over?
Limit board business?
The discussion wasn't on the motion.
Motions do.
I haven't made the motion yet.
Kristen?
So there's still time to make.
Are we still discussing, or
We are still discussing.
before any motion is made?
We can continue the discussion, you can make a motion, and then discussion would be limited to that, just that topic, but since that's a topic that we are on, it will work either way.
Can I say something now, then?
I lost track of who had the floor.
I'll make the motion, because I'm sure what you're going to say is in relation to the motion, so, the resolution. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the resolution of the mayor and council of the borough of Winchester requesting a delay in the hiring of a superintendent for the West Morris Regional High School District as written and signed by Valerie Egan.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, Jackie?
For discussion.
It's up for
Go ahead,
discussion.
Couple of things. Besides the fact that this sort of ties politics into education, which is not necessarily always very successful for education, were we to wait until a new person is elected from Chester and no one can actually file for the office or declare to run for at least, I think, a month. So that's a big question mark who that person might be. When they come on board, they will have had no training. And since this is one of the biggest decisions this board would make, is it advisable to have someone with no training? We wait for someone with no training to come on board while we have 3 board members, 3 seats from Washington Township that would be expiring, only 2 of which will be refilled. Presently, we have those 3 board members sitting here. They've been on this board for 3 years. They have 3 years of experience. They've been to training. They've been through the hiring process for a principal at Central. They have the experience of sitting on the board, working with this group, and it would, to me, how do you give up that experience, that training, in order to allow someone with no experience and no training to come in and make the most important decision you have?
And we have a current superintendent who's willing to help us, that will not be here in more than a few months.
Jim?
I'd like to rephrase what I said earlier. This board should not have its hands tied by any outside governance.
John, you had,
Marcia, I was just going to ask a question.
do you have a mic?
What number did we hear of districts who are now looking for superintendents? Excuse me, I just want to clarify.
10 more advertised in the Sunday Star Ledger.
So I would presume that our candidates would also be looking at those schools, right? So
I kind of see this as a great opportunity for us to implement Dave LeBron's suggestion of getting a current administrator in there and, you know,
I'm not sure. I've seen many examples from other institutions, the business world, where the set intention is to only bring in an interim when there's a possibility to look for a permanent replacement.
But nobody said that's not going to happen.
Absolutely. I don't think one precludes the other. We may get there.
Marcia, am I wrong? But have we hired anybody yet? I haven't spoken to anybody yet. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We're going to talk to people. We're going to look at people. I don't understand what Chester has anything to do with this, number one. Thank you.
You've never had a problem being heard.
I know. How about that? But what is wrong with actually taking the steps to find out really what's out there? What's wrong with taking the steps to say, hey, what if we have people in-house that's better than people we're going to interview from out-of-house? I don't understand it. Why do we stop and wait for a governing body, for one reason, has no control over us, and they don't have any reason to ask us? I understand why they're asking, but they have no right to ask us for that. We don't have any right to ask them what they need to do.
well,
I think.
Were you hired for that? I mean, were you elected to that position to wait for somebody else to tell you what to do?
well, I have been in conversation with the person who is supporting this resolution at Chesterborough. I have a great respect for that person. They've
So have I.
actually been a Board of Ed president. They've served on a board. I respect the thinking that is behind this resolution. So I am mindful of their thinking. They're feeling that they have been denied a seat on this board for years, wrongly denied a seat, and I am willing to honor the spirit of this resolution. And it's certainly up for a vote on the board. I'm one vote.
Where did this idea that they have been wrongly denied a seat on the board come from?
Well, I believe,
Who created that idea?
I think I've heard that.
Heard it.
I had this conversation with you, Jim, about a year ago about how they should have a seat and why don't they? And someone, how come the Chesterborough hasn't spoken up for, 10 years and demanded their seat?
And it took 2 or 3 years to convince the borough council that they should go after that seat.
So,
Took me a long time to get them to go to get that seat. I had current council members say they thought I was crazy when I suggested that they go ask the Department of Education for that seat. And then a lot of things have happened in the last year and I don't even know what they are, but the State Department of Education came to conclusion that Chester Borough was entitled to a seat. So now they're going to have a seat. We don't know when that seat will be assigned. We don't know if Mendham Township or some other Washington Township or Chester Township, who else is left?
Mendham Borough.
Thank you, or Mendham Borough could decide to sue the state government of New Jersey, the Department of Education, saying, why are you doing this? You cannot interfere with the board's business and to delay the board's business.
Kristen?
At least that is my opinion.
Yes, Jackie. Thank you, Jim.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, was Julie Clements a Chester Borough resident?
No, she lives in Chester Township.
Okay, I thought maybe she was Chester Borough.
And I believe on the current K-8 board in the consolidated Chester districts, there is one?
I think one borough.
One borough resident, and the rest, nobody ever asks in the Chester Consolidated District, are you in the borough or the township?
So in Chester K-8, they vote across the lines between Chester.
They don't
Borough and
appear at this point in time to have the political problems that we have in our region.
They don't have a dedicated seat for Chester Borough in the K-8.
No, it's elected at large, just as me and Marcia were elected at large to represent the Chesters.
I have another point I'd just like to bring up. I know if the suggestion, and when you talk about this, you mix two things. You mix an interim hiring position with this resolution. They're really two different things. So I don't think, they're two different questions. We shouldn't tie them together in one motion. And you didn't really, but you just talked about the resolution. When Jamie ran 4 years ago for this board, his April election resulted in a tie. And there had to be a second election. It didn't happen until June. Were this to happen with this next election, and you ended up with a tie in Chester, well, then you wouldn't have an answer in April. You'd be waiting until probably late June to seat someone. And that is, it's very unlikely, but it has happened, and it's happened 4 years ago. So we know it can happen. And that's not, what are we going to do then? Say we're going to wait till June?
Marcia, we have students who come in that are in the building now, who come in a new class will come in the fall. They need to be educated. Decisions need to be made. And our job is to make sure that the district is well run. And the board gets to decide this, the board as a whole, not any one of us. But I wish that you had spoken to whoever you spoke to on the Chester Borough Council before our last meeting, because now what you're asking the board to do is to flip-flop and to decide at one meeting that we're going to move forward and hire a superintendent, and then to decide at the next meeting, no, we're going to wait and place an interim from within the district. And what's going to happen at the next meeting? Are we going to decide, no, let's go forward again? I think all of that puts the district at a huge, distinct disadvantage and says to any pool of candidates that we're not serious. We're not serious about hiring. We're not serious about educating our students. And I don't think that that's the message that we want to send. Yes, Jamie?
One of the reasons that perhaps that Marcia has changed her mind as...
Can Marcia speak for herself?
The reason that I've changed my mind, consistent with what Marcia just said, is because at the last meeting, Kristen, you put this board in a very difficult position. You proposed a consultant to us without any background information. There was nothing in the packet. There was no resume. It was a fait accompli. And there was confusion.
You voted for it.
Do I have the floor?
You voted for it.
Do I have the floor?
You do now.
Let me know when you're done.
You voted for the resolution to hire the consultant. You knew that you had seen Dr. DiBattista's letter of retirement, his retirement notice. You knew, and you had the same opportunity that I did or any other board member did to research options.
Can I have the floor now?
Yes, you may.
I want to address something that John mentioned earlier. John, a few minutes ago, speculated about how a business might handle this. There's obviously a lot of differences between a school district and a business, but I can tell you in my experience, the way businesses work, when there's a change at the top, there is not an extended lame duck period. Immediately, there's a change. Typically, it's to an interim of someone internally while the organization looks for a permanent head, CEO or whatever. That's what this district needs to do. This district needs to immediately put in an interim of a current district employee while doing a thorough search that includes the new Chester Borough representative.
I would agree we should do a very thorough search. I think everyone here agrees with that.
Who says we're not going to do a thorough search, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you.
So you support immediately putting an interim superintendent in who is an existing employee?
That would not be legal because we actually have a sitting superintendent at the moment.
I'm in agreement with doing a thorough search, is exactly what I said.
Can we call the imminent motion?
Call the question? Yes, we
Call the
can.
question?
All in favor of Marcia and Jamie's
Excuse me,
motion?
as a point of order, Kristen,
The question has been called. We need to vote on that, and then we can move forward.
you need to vote on calling the question first.
You may be right. Let me see. Can you share your cheat sheet?
And you need a 2/3 vote also.
Which motion is that?
Marcia's motion to support the resolution from Chester Borough.
Right, well, we had a motion and a second to call the question. All in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? All in favor of Marcia and Jamie's motion to accept.
It's Jamie's motion. I made the motion.
He
the motion?
seconded
Okay,
the
I'm
motion.
sorry. Usually you don't
That's-
phrase it that way, but go ahead.
I'd like to note that who made the motion and who seconded it. To accept Chester Borough's resolution to delay, I don't remember your exact wording, regarding the superintendent.
Accept resolution.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
No. Abstentions? None. Okay, motion fails. Thank you, and thank you for the point of order, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Is there any other new business now that that is behind us?
I have
Marcia?
I have new business. Since I'm on a roll here, I'll do another one. No, I have two of them, so I'll do this one first. I want to bring up again the superintendent evaluation process. I've mentioned this briefly several times, but it is one of the most important tasks the school board has, and I think it's a task that we could improve on. I've been reading a lot about superintendent reviews on the Administrators Association's website, looking at some of the templates. I've been on a lot of different school templates sites looking for what other schools do, just trying to gather some knowledge. When I was first elected, we did evaluate our current superintendent, and I expressed to this board that I thought it was I was surprised that it was as brief as it was. I thought it could be more robust. Certainly not in any criticism of our current superintendent. It's merely a process that I think we could improve on. And I believe that's something this board is tasked to do. So in reading on it, one of the things that they came across, they said, is that an ideal time to look at how you review your superintendent is when you hire a new one. And you look at your current practice, you see what is out there. So I would ask this board to consider, let's start thinking about our superintendent review process and what we could add to it, how we could make it more robust, how we could bring it in line with the most current thinking on how you evaluate your superintendent. And I think that by waiting until it's time to evaluate the superintendent is too late. There's certain aspects of a superintendent evaluation that I brought up before that I thought would be helpful is, I have certain ideas in mind, so I would just be interested in hearing from this board what they think about starting to look at it.
Would you mind, writing up or sharing your list of suggestions with the full board so that we could discuss it in a more informed way at a future meeting?
I'd be happy to do that.
Just
Right,
as an
thanks.
FYI, Marcia, we used a different format, I think, what was it, a year ago, Tom?
Yeah.
And it
One
was-
before this last one.
It was just completely different. It was, I thought, pretty
Yeah.
comprehensive.
Yes.
So, I mean, this isn't the only system we've used to evaluate the superintendent, the one that we just did. We used one, I guess, 2 years ago that was much different. So we have tried different things. And you might want to, we might want to go back to that.
Yes. Agreed.
We did look at what the school board puts out, which is appropriate to basically any school district in the state, including large urban districts, K-12s. So much of what they were putting out at that time did not apply to us, and we tried to focus on what did work for our district. I know we've had this conversation, you've brought this up before, and right now, and it's valuable. Right now, I think our priority is to look for a new superintendent for this district. We have other things that come up sooner. We have gone through the superintendent evaluation in a timely basis. What I think we need to be doing is a board self-evaluation, because I believe that's part of CUSAC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And before we start doing another superintendent evaluation, I think we need a board self-evaluation. So we can't just drop everything to do a superintendent evaluation. And it has value, but there are priorities.
Okay, well, I will take Kristen's suggestion and show you what I've been reading, examples of what other schools do, what the Administrators Association recommends. It's really a terrific article. So I will start doing that, and I'll send it to the board.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And you said you had a second thing?
Yep, I have a second. In our, the board received a copy of a, thanks, the board received a copy of a letter from a resident. It was in our weekly update, I believe, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And in the letter, the resident of Chester Township made a couple recommendations to this board that she, in her opinion, believes we need to pay attention to and to do. So,
Are you referring to Charlene Arrington's letter?
Yep.
To the board?
Mm-hmm.
That I forwarded to our board attorney to see if there were any recommendations that he had for us arising out of that. And because she had proposed some action items, a number of which I don't think she was aware that we already do, but there's always room for improvement, so I forwarded it to Russ, and he will report back soon on whether or not he finds anything that we need to update.
Okay, well, that would have been really helpful. How would I have known that? I mean, that
Ask the
letter, how
question.
would I have known that you had taken that step to look at her points and create, a question to the board attorney? I didn't know that.
Could have asked me.
But don't you think that would have been a good thing to kind of inform the board? Here is a letter in your packet. It has a lot of information in it. You might be confused. How should I process all this information? So
When it was
I
in the
would
packet,
believe-
when you received it in the packet, I had not sent it to the attorney. If I had done so, I would have given a cover letter explaining that.
Okay, well, I'm just saying.
After the fact, and I'm waiting for a report back before I
Okay, so
report it
that
to the
kind of,
board.
I would be happy to wait also for what he has to say.
Okay.
And it would, I just think that as a matter of board, cohesion, if you had told us that, say, listen, you got this in the mail, sit on it, I'm working on it, I'm looking, I'm going to ask the board attorney, we're going to spend a little money and and get some answers for you, it would have been very helpful for me. So I'm just kind of taken aback that that was happening in the background, and I had no idea. I'm kind of looking at this stuff myself. Why was I even doing that? So I'm done with my new business.
Because I'm just one board member, we all 9 are charged with making decisions, and it's good for all of us to look at it.
I know,
In the
but as a-
meantime, I sent it off for advice because there were specific items listed in her letter, specific suggestions and specific action items, and I'm not an attorney, so I sent it to one.
So did anyone else on this board know that Kristen had sent Arrington's letter on, asking questions?
No, to the contrary, I was confused by the article in the Observer Tribune. I don't know whether you misquoted or not, but there was a full story where you seem to discard every suggestion that Mrs. Arrington made in her letter with a comment to the effect of, none of this is necessary.
I don't recall the article at this point, and I'm sorry if you have it, then I'd be happy to comment on it.
It was included in the board packet.
Not this one.
Well, no, we get them weekly. It was not in last week's paper.
Well, just a request from me that I think I would find it very helpful coming from the board president, just an FYI.
Now, we all have very busy schedules, and for me to contact every board member every time I take an action would really probably drive you crazy, as well as...
It could have been like a weekly compilation of, heads up, FYI, this is going on. That would be my suggestion, so thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Any other new business? Then at this time, I will open to the public. Please state your name and town and limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Yes, Leslie? At the mic, please. Thank you.
I'm Leslie Muley, Long Valley. I have 2 questions. I'd like to know why these meetings are being videotaped.
That's a very good question. I think the gentleman videotaping has been hired by an outside group, individual. I'm unsure, but as a board, at a board meeting, it's a public meeting, and anybody can come in and can tape.
So you don't know who's videotaping the meetings?
No.
I can ask him,
That's a little unsettling, in my opinion, that we're being videotaped and we don't even know who's videotaping us.
It's a public meeting.
It's a public meeting.
I repeat, it's a little unsettling not to know who is videotaping us. My other question is for Mr. Button. When you quoted the rankings of Mendham High School, you omitted Wmrhsd Central. So I'd like to know where Wmrhsd Central falls in those numbers.
I wish I had that data with me, but I don't, so I can't answer the question. But no, I'd love to hear the answer, too.
Why don't you have that number? Why do you only have Mendham's number and not Wmrhsd Central?
Does anyone else on this board have that number? I guess none of the members have it. So.
But you're the one that came up with the numbers for Mendham. So why didn't you include Wmrhsd Central at the same time?
There are an awful lot of things about this district that I did not include in my comments. I could speak for hours about the opportunities for improvement in this district, but there's just not enough time.
But why did you include one school and not the second school? I don't understand why you did that.
Because I was limited in time.
Could you give me a real answer, please?
You have my answer.
Well, I would like you to please, next time you make a statement, to include both schools, not just Mendham, and to include Wmrhsd Central. And I'd be curious to know the numbers of Wmrhsd Central.
I'd be happy to do that. Next meeting, I'll report on that.
I'll see you there.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Jan Asrajad in Mendham Township. I'm really glad that Ms. Asdahl brought up that letter that Ms. Arrington wrote to the paper. I do have a copy right here of that letter. And it was interesting reading this letter because She says in the beginning, suggestions submitted to you, the board, because of my findings, which we're still yet to hear her findings. And she talks about the deficiencies, and she wants to address existing management inadequacies, will help ensure that public funds are being spent wisely and judiciously, and that our new superintendent is 100% focused on education of our high school students, which is a little really incredible to read, considering you look at the resume of Dr. Anthony DiBattista, and he has, just for a few things, has negotiated the board salary increase offered down every year of superintendency, have taken less than the minimum increase mandated by annual contract. He's requested a complete salary freeze in 2009 and 10. The freeze was not suggested by the Board of Ed. I could go on and on. Let's see. There's professional and vacation time, 2010-11. Travel, workshop, seminars budget was $12,000. He spent $1,700. 2011-2012, the budget seminar was $11,000. He spent $100. He has conducted school business and been available to work with parents, faculty, administrators, and board members on every vacation ever taken, as well as every conference and seminar. So I'm just curious what exactly Ms. Arrington is looking for. He's also helped to coordinate the appropriate grief counseling following the fatalities of 8 students in the past 7 years, the national recognition by Newsweek and the Washington Post. So her letter that is littered with suggestions based on her findings would be very interesting to hear her findings, the president of your group, CBS, Mr. Button. So I just am also curious to know, like when you get handed a 500-page, going back 5-year Oprah request, which I happen to have a copy of right here, where Ms. Arrington's asking for the daily calendar schedule, list of appointments, desk diary, and any other documents showing the daily activities of the Wmrhsd Regional High School District Superintendent for the past 5 years, travel reimbursement requests and all other documents for the past 5 years, a list of any or all funded seminars, workshops, or continuing ed for Dr. DiBattista for the past 5 years, and cell phone records for his cell phone for the past 5 years. I understand that it took 46 administrative hours. I can't imagine the dollar number that took, although I do have a copy of the board attorney's fees based for this. And his fees alone based for this was over close to $3,000. And I'm just going through here looking at the description. He had to call the business administrator. He had to call and email Dr. DiBattista. So our administrators are completely distracted by this 500-page Oprah request that goes back for 5 years and costs thousands of dollars taken right out of our district. I'm just curious, the budget. Well, I know we've got to reduce the spending 2% and to fit into the state's box. How much of that is contractual, like salaries?
Salaries, Jackie, you probably be better, but about 80,
70.
70%? About
70%. Okay, so that leaves 30%. 30% is for overhead, electric, paper, pencils, supplies, correct? What else?
Insurance.
Insurance. Okay, so that leaves discretionary spending at about how much percent? What percent?
I think we used to say 9.
Right, 9-10%.
9-10%. So, huh?
About 30 seconds left.
Where does the money come from when you get hit with a 500-page, 5-year Oprah request that completely disrupts his entire district and completely takes away from the education that everybody is supposed to be focusing on at the school? Where does that money come from? Mr. Button, do you know?
Sorry,
time is up.
Sorry about that.
The money comes from taxpayers and from out of the district, out of our operating expenses.
Yeah, that's a shame. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Christine Myers from Mendham Township. Jamie, I just wanted to go back to a few of the things that you said earlier, because there were, in fact, things that you said that were inaccurate that I need to, on behalf of my own personal recollection and the mayor's, need to correct. First of all, Ralph Goodwin, in a meeting with me and the mayors, said specifically that he did not support your numbers, that he was shocked that you could believe that you saw that in any way out of what he reported, and that your numbers were, in fact, inaccurate.
Christine, would you mind if I just
You let her finish first.
read the statement so you can say what's inaccurate about it?
She has 5 minutes. Can you please let her finish, and then you can...
What I would suggest you would do is contact Ralph again, or if you want to have an offline conversation with me with the data that I was provided by Ralph, we can certainly do that, but he did not support your numbers.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. All right. Second of all, you missed it due to your accident, and I'm glad to see you've recovered. But in our meeting with the Department of Education, they warned us strongly against relying on the New Jersey Monthly Magazine and the Monmouth University study in any way, shape, or form to use that study as a calibration for educational quality. So I know you missed it. It was taped that night, but they really, in fact, strongly urged against that. The SAT scores and the decline in the verbal, I sit on the Curriculum Advisory Board. I did not see those numbers. In fact, those numbers were reported differently to me. I know that the SAT only has a 5-year horizon, so to go from your first child at 2002 to, I guess, Kevin's graduating with Tommy this spring, that time horizon is, in fact, they don't use that time horizon, and they tell us not to. So the numbers we received in CAB and the numbers that were reported to me were not the same as yours, so that would be another place where I think you and I could have a conversation if you'd like, but I don't see your numbers as being accurate. And then the last point, well, 2 more points. You said that tonight you heard an example of how the schools were being treated differently, and you used that to support the fact that there were a greater amount of funds being spent on one school versus another. Can I assume that your reflection of this night's conversation was about the Glacier football thing? Is that what you were referring to?
That was what I was referring to, yeah.
Okay, so as your constituent, I have to tell you that what I heard tonight was the fact that both schools were given equal dollar amounts, and that our school chose, through its parents, to fund it separately in a different way for that activity. To me, that's not a treatment by the board. That was a choice by me as a booster and you maybe as a booster. So I don't think that is an accurate reflection of what I heard this evening.
And the point I was making is that the numbers that Doug Peckinack gave to the entire board do not support that statement.
Can you please let her finish,
but
and then you can
what you were referring to was tonight, and I copied down a statement that said, this is an example of why the schools, you asked why the schools were being treated differently, so that's why I bring that up. I wanted to point out to you, as your constituent, that is not what I heard this evening. Okay? And then lastly, in business, you've been in business, I've been in business for 25 years, and I would give you 50% that we ever have an interim CEO versus you wake up one morning and one guy's gone and the next guy's in the seat. It goes 50-50 both ways. It has to be evaluated based on the tenor and the tone of the company and the market environment you're in and the folks out there. So as you guys look at a superintendent, I understand that the options are available to us, but I don't know that the pool of candidates will improve. And I now, as a constituent, Jamie, urge you to have the greatest continuity for the students up and coming. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, if you want to stay, if it's okay with our president, I'll address each of the points that you made.
Sure, go ahead.
This is audience.
I don't know if that's appropriate.
I don't think that it is. But you're welcome to have a conversation after.
Like tomorrow, it's late.
Okay. And I know. Any other questions or comments from Mr. Gafrida?
Good evening, Mike Gafrida, Mendham High School teacher. A couple questions. Number one, I'm a little bit confused by I suppose there's a lot of in politics going on, but the question about the consulting firm and the accusations that you were led into hiring a firm that you didn't know anything about. If I'm not mistaken, when I looked at the agenda last week, that consulting firm was approved by you people for another position. You already approved them. You had to know what you were talking about when you approved them once during the meeting. I would imagine you would have known the second time. The second thing I want to mention, and at the risk of agreeing with Mr. Button,
Always a risk.
I'm a football coach, and you're all largely uninformed about the whole clinic situation. And I'd rather not get into great details here, but just your assumption that the money for the clinic is being fronted by the Booster Club is not necessarily true. Talk to my wife about how much of it's coming out of my pocket, and then you might know that something's going on. He had a decent question, but there's a lot of things going on here that seem to preclude some of the answers. So if you want to talk to me about it, sometimes I'll be glad to talk to you about it.
I'd like to hear it right now.
Privately, amongst the group, yes. Publicly with these people, no, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Can you wait until everybody's had a turn in the back here?
It's been a while since I've been here. My name is Tom Bruning, late of Mendham Township. Was on the board for 6 years. I was president for 4, and I was president when Anthony moved up to assistant superintendent.
Mr. Bruning, I say it's nice. We've had a number of phone conversations over the years. It's nice to see you and meet you.
Good to see you. Although your retirement was imminent, the hastening is disheartening to me. You will be sorely missed in the district. Not your managerial style, not your facilities plans, not your commencement addresses, or any of the other administrivia that's part of your current position. Rather, it is the commitment you have made to public education. You are an extraordinarily gifted and talented individual who has dedicated your life to helping teach others. First as a classroom teacher, then as an assistant superintendent responsible for creating the curriculum that many feel is among the finest in the nation or the state, and now for too few weeks as superintendent. First in your mind has always been the students. I was on the board when we elevated you to assistant superintendent. I had mixed feelings about taking you out of the classroom. You were revered by students and your colleagues as someone who only cared about getting the most out of your students and the students that we entrusted to you. You didn't fail us as a teacher, as an assistant superintendent, or as a chief school administrator in setting educational goals for those who are responsible for, and then doing all you could to coach, cajole, remove obstacles, or whatever it took to help others reach the goals. With school employees currently being viewed as a burden on society and the extravagance we can do without, it is people like you who encourage those around you to the noble public service that is the only way I can see out of the political morass and economic decline in the U.S. Without good quality public education leading the way and giving the students the tools and knowledge to move forward, the quality of life in the United States will surely decline. I'm sure you could, but I'm sure it would take some time to list your accomplishments at Wmrhsd. The list foremost would include the students you have motivated and the colleagues you have inspired. Under miscellaneous, you include physical plan improvement, board meeting agendas, and everything else that doesn't involve the relationship with the people you have touched. There are few, if any, people in this room who have done more for the improvement of the education in this district than you. You have experienced the worst tactics of people who don't know you, who don't care about you, and who don't care about education. And isn't education what we're all here for? I always thought that one-issue proponents are small-minded, selfish individuals who can't see the forest for the trees, and in some cases don't even know there are forests to see. On about the first 2 hours of the meeting tonight, I really, really, really missed this place. I can't tell you. We started IB, and I can't believe what it has come to. To have teachers going to Nepal, that is so heartening that a district can be that endowed to allow those things to happen. When we started IB, people were against it. They said, we want AP, we don't want IB. And to see what IB has done for the students in this district is so gladdening to my heart. I'm proud to have served with you, and I'm sure that whatever you do, you will do with the excellence that you have demonstrated here at West Morris. You're an exemplar of one of the most noble professions on earth, and have earned the highest accolades that I believe anyone can receive. You are an educator. Good luck in all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Any other questions or comments from the public? Yes.
Leslie Long, Mendham Township. And a silly question. Can I ask you to ask the cameraman who's hired him? Why is it a secret?
I believe he has been asked.
And so who is it?
He would not tell me.
Can I ask him? Who has hired you?
Turn the camera.
I mean, this is silly. This is silly.
This is kind
There's our answer.
this is part of the meeting we go through.
Right.
Silliness.
It's really it's silliness. And I am jumping into this late in the game. I have not been involved in this whole process, and I commend you all for all the work that you do and the time that you give. And I know that you all truly care. But it seems as though a few of you have hijacked the board for your own personal interests that I share. I get it. But we can't hijack the whole board and the whole agenda of our town and our educational system for one issue. And to push it through at all expenses is not the way to do it. We need to get back on track, take a deep breath, and let's start new. Let's work together here, because the tone is terrible. I mean, you sit here in the audience and you're like, oh my God, how can they even talk to each other? So anyway, I'm joining this late in the game, and I'd like to say, let's work together. Let's move on. Let's move on, and let's get back to the quality of the education of our schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Feel free to come to more meetings. Are there any other questions or comments from the public? Bob's notepad is full.
I believe the meetings are being videotaped so that
Just
it can
state
be.
your name and
Oh, Dan Astrojad, Mendham Township, and I believe the meetings are being videotaped so they're more transparent to more people that are in their homes, which definitely should be, since it's really pretty sad. I just want to read one thing from Phil Garber's article from December 16th, and that is, Ms. Arrington said that her review of the documents showed no improprieties. None. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Yes, Mr. Scobletti.
Just want to make a couple of quick comments. This was yet another meeting where I promised I wouldn't speak. Open Public Records Act of New Jersey, you can film public meetings, and I just want to applaud whoever came up with the idea for microphones, because if any of you have watched the meetings that I've filmed and posted online, sound quality is great. So I think it's a definite improvement, and no one seemed to mind all those years when I was there with the camera, or before that with the little audio recorders and whatnot. That's about it. I don't want to say anything else because, wouldn't want to be de-Batisted by the community or members of the community. So, thank you.
Now you have your own adverb.
Any other questions or comments from the public? If there aren't any others, I will close to the public. And before I have a motion to adjourn, Dave, did you have a question?
No, the young lady asks the same.
Okay, great.
The expense of the Oprah request.
Okay, great. All right, then may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?